those who are joining in, especially the new pillars that are coming into the tribe, wholeness, the existing pillars that are already here. Thank you so much for gracing us with your love and your presence. I'm going to go ahead and again take a moment and let this get warmed up on the other side. And while we do that, we always have something that goes on around here because this is indeed our time to shine. And what that means is that we have this opportunity in this collective to do something that is quite extraordinary here in the planet. But before we get to that, as we always do around this time, we are going to send this wholeness and balanced vibration across the space and give everybody an opportunity here in ambassador training, give everyone an opportunity to actually send their wholeness through the tribe. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm Seven Bomar. I'm in Costa Rica. Wholeness is Tribe Vibes. It's September the 3rd, Friday, and we're about to go in. So wholeness.
Wholeness. This is Sean from Los Angeles, ready to catch this bill, family. Wholeness.
Wholeness, Sean. This is Alex in Miami, Florida.
Wholeness, Sean. This is Adam from Illinois.
Wholeness, Adam. This is Vivi Alenci. I'm in California.
Wholeness, Vivi. This is Nadesh. I'm in Costa Rica. Wholeness across the space. Seeing you.
Wholeness, Nadesh. This is Rukia in St. Louis.
Wholeness, Rukia. This is Andrew down I-44 in Springfield, Missouri. Wholeness Tribe.
Wholeness, Andrew. This is Roxanne in San Luis Obispo, California. Wholeness.
Wholeness, my name's Blake. I'm coming to you from Houston, Texas.
Wholeness, Blake from Houston, Texas. This is Cassandra from Aurora, Colorado.
Wholeness, Cassandra. This is Mike from Porterville, California.
Wholeness, Mike. This is Jerry from Stone Mountain. Wholeness, family.
Wholeness, Jeremy, Jaguar Trace, coming in from Davie, Florida, sending so much love to you all, so much gratitude for being here, many blessings. I hope.
Wholeness, Tribe, and Jaguar. Patricia here from Jacksonville, Florida.
Wholeness, Patricia. This is Melissa coming in from Atlanta. We going in. Let's go.
Let's go.
Wholeness, Melissa. This is Henok, Wholeness Tribe.
Wholeness, Hanuk. This is Sarah from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Wholeness.
Wholeness, Tribe, Lynetta, checking in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Hope y'all are well. Let's get it. Lynetta checking in.
Wholeness, Lynette. This is Reem from Canberra, Australia. Wholeness family.
Wholeness, Reem. This is Michelle, being supreme in Sarasota, Florida.
Oh, nice.
Wholeness, Tribe, Glorian here in Delaware. Dom.
Wholeness, Glorian. This is Dom from the Big Apple.
Wholeness, Dominique. This is Aziza from Atlanta, Georgia.
Wholeness, Aziza and Tribe. This is Slims from Nashville, Tennessee.
Wholeness, Slims and Tribe. This is Sammy from Texas.
Wholeness family, this is Julianne from Texas.
Wholeness, Julianne. This is Michelle in Michigan. Wholeness tribe.
All right, tribe, let's go. Let's go. Y'all ready to shine and stand up on this one? We got 4 more minutes before we're about to take this thing off. If you wanted to send your grace across inner space, let's hear it.
Wholeness, this is Sivan from Arizona.
You know that from you though. You got to turn on the camera and the music.
Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations family. This is Tanya calling in from the UK. Many blessings to all of you. Much love.
Wholeness, Tanya. This is Sequinda in Oklahoma. Wholeness fam.
Wholeness, Sequinda. This is Jonathan from Greenville, South Carolina.
Wholeness, Jonathan. This is Patella from North Carolina. Wholeness family.
Wholeness, Patanya. Mary, sending up love and light from Illinois.
Wholeness Mary, Adam from Canada.
Wholeness Adam, Jamila from Saudi Arabia.
Wholeness family, pretty much love from SC, Carolinas, US. Much love.
And there you have it, tribe. And just like that, we are on our way. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to set my lines. I'm going to clear the space. I will welcome all of those who have their Palo Santo and their sage this evening to get on it, because this is time, really, this is the renewal process. I always say that, you know, if we can be continuously renewed, we'll always have the opportunity to be on point with ourselves. I always like to take the moment to just center into the space. Like even when I'm coming in, there's a lot of things, you know, you're setting up, you're making sure that the thing is streaming, that it's running, that the lights is not too hot, that you're not looking purple, you know, because the Kelvins are all high, you know, to get the internet connection going on, get everybody in the personal space settled. And then, you know, what about the message, right? So there's been a lot of cultivation in what is been given here at Secret Energy. And I always feel like every single build, I do the best to bring something that is a synthesis of all of the builds. And I believe personally that I've done that continuously for the last 12 years. So let tonight not be any different than that. And I said we were going to ride out. And that's because I do have something very special to share. Today is actually the first time that I'm going to unveil what I'm calling the metaphysical data set. And I'm going to actually be just smoothing through the build today. You know, well, I always say it's not going to be in 30 minutes, who knows what it's going to be, but I have a real layout here of getting us through this refresher so that way we can start enjoying what we came here for. If you're out there and you know that you actually came here to make a difference to this planet, to this space, to this projection, and also you're probably even making differences already, whether you know it or not. But if you came here for that, I will ask that you just type number 1 inside the chat if that's you, that you know you have a purpose in this space. There is something that you do, and there's a special power that you have, and you came here to shine. And what it's really about, especially in listening to this message, is not only connecting with others that are on that same harmonic vibration, but also getting your next update in synchronization, because it's not like you just want to keep all of the information of existence with you at all times right on the front of your mind. Now, of course, we do have it all inside of our DNA, but what is most important is the part that we really need to be using. So I want to begin this just in the tradition that we have created here as what we know to be immortal beings, beings that do not perish, that our consciousness will exist forever. And we come in recognition of that with the universal symbol of touching and agreeing. And what this is this is us saying that, hey, I'm here, I'm in attendance, I'm with this total spectrum, this total vibration of all shapes, forms, sizes, fashions, frequencies, here at this moment in this time, in agreement of unity and all of the power and all the growth that comes with that. It's also an opportunity that if any time in the future that you feel like, man, you know, it's really getting to me, I'm all alone, I'm by myself, nobody's vibing with me, you know, and you're not getting those things that you prefer, the glory, the honor, the riches, just remember this moment, because that is here in abundance and it's here to share with you. And I do my best every time I come into this space to conduct this mantle, which is just something that is passed to you. It's something that does not belong to you. I'm a custodian of knowledge, wisdom, and experience here on the plane. I apply it to myself. And that's what's taken me so deep into myself to realize that everything and all is self. And our journey here is how long it takes us to figure that out. And within that process, I've actually searched quite a bit to be able to simplify, as I said, the journey. When I first came into just spirituality as a title, I felt like, okay, this is going to be it. I'm going to be studying spirituality all of my life. And true enough, it has been a lifetime of reading into a level of spirituality that I would say that comes from books, all the way into going through personal experiences myself and being able to connect that with the knowledge that has come from those ancient books and texts. However, what I will say and what will be the vibration of today is it's not about having all of the knowledge. It's about having wisdom, and the wisdom that is necessary for you right now, that's going to be the most valuable to you right now. That also means that in the whole scope of this, the most important thing right now is you in the present, not necessarily you in the past, not necessarily you in the future. The one that's going to have the biggest impact on you is you in the present. And I come to the awareness that if you somehow don't like the world that you're in, then you're systematically saying that you don't like your mother. And that's because it's your mother that brought you into this world. So if you don't have respect for where you're at in life, that is the quest that you need to go on. If you're disappointed in yourself, if you're disgusted with yourself, if you don't feel that, hey, you know, I'm on alignment, I'm making it happen, I'm doing my thing, you know, I feel totally comfortable with who I am, that's this quest that we're on. And once you reach that point, then you'll love your mother more than anything, because you'll realize that you got a chance to go through this experience because of her. And so there are many that are disgruntled with their experience at this stage, so they hate their mother or any kind of energy around them that is motherly. And it is them also that this message is for, because there is a destroy mission that is already deployed on this planet, meaning a self-destruct, where you can experience a world that is rather callous, rather dark, rather dangerous, if you may. And there's a saying, and that saying goes, if you think this world is bad, wait until you get a load of some of the others. Meaning that in this experience, rather than us looking across dimensions, if we can only remember 150 years ago, where our great-great-grandmothers and fathers experienced even a world that was embedded within war. And the frequency and the vibration of war is somewhat similar to the frequency and the vibration that many felt when the whole pandemic started launching. And then all this stuff was going crazy, and the job was like, you got to stay home. And then the stock markets was crashing. And then there was this energy that was moving around, and this energy brought everyone into this awakening in many ways. They got serious. It was now time to really get self together and figure out what self really even is. And so from time to time on the planet, we always have this wake up call, this alarm that goes off to wake us up. And I trust that with you awakening even just one time, that you'll never sleep again, that you'll realize the power and the ability of all the things that you can do when you're constantly renewed. And as I said this evening, it's about that. It's about that constant renewal. It's about regeneration. It's about actually offloading many of the things that are causing you to age and onboarding the right kind of awareness that will allow you to begin to not only regenerate, but begin to expand into your true mission here and your true purpose in immortality. And as I was saying, when we were touching and connecting earlier, as adepts, we are aware that it does not end here. So whatever we need to do it right now. Whatever we're going to experience, we need to experience it now. And while we're looking to, at times, this external idea of spiritual growth and connection that involves, I don't know, people were flying around the world on broomsticks playing Quidditch. I don't know, somebody throwing lightning from their hands at another person. Truly, the spiritual experience is personal. You could be going through one of the craziest portals inside of your mind and be sitting right next to somebody on the bus, and they don't know what's going on beside the look on your face. And you can feel an infinite amount of energetic potential inside of your body. But even then, someone right next to you may feel nothing, because there's something about this experience that is attempting to teach us. And if we allow ourselves to become apt pupils, in this case, just a being that you would, as a master, give instruction to, if we allow ourselves to become that, then we'll receive our instruction, we'll receive our guides from within. So I asked first this question on this quest: why do we even study? Somebody complimented my second camera the other day, so there it is. I'm gonna ride out a little bit. Why do we even study? What is this whole pursuit even of spiritual knowledge? Like, I've been on this for 12 years personally in the public eye, but all my life I've been studying these books and looking through this knowledge. Why am I even doing that? Why are you even here on this show today? Like, what is it even about this message that you're looking for? What do you expect to happen? So I had to drill in with my own self, because that's what this is about. It's about me coming to an awareness of myself. Give me 1 second here. So it's about me coming into awareness of myself, and it's about me coming into awareness of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I had to ask myself, why are you studying all this stuff? What are you really looking to get out of all of this? Let's stop the mind. Let's stop tomorrow. Let's stop all these people. Let's stop everything that ever happened. Just center in with me real quick and let me know, why are you doing this? And so I came up with two answers to myself right off. The first one is I want to know my origins. Just like back in the day where they would have like every single family member on the family, and this is your great grandfather, this is your great grandfather, this is your uncle, he did this. I wanted that. I wanted to know, where were my people? Like, where did we come from? Like, what was our story? And right off, when I started seeing the story of the consensus conflicting with the ancient knowledge, that's when I knew right away that I had a journey ahead of me. Because there was this moment when I went through the awakening where I realized that I had really been lied to, that the world and all of its proponents of knowledge that it claims to have omitted what I felt was the biggest thing, which was about the activation of the human body and the power and the potential. And from there, every single thing had to be under scrutiny. So I got the opportunity in the world, in this life, to let go of everything that I thought I believed in. Like the statement says, you've learned, now you must unlearn. And I went through the difficulties in the process of actually deprogramming dogmas and deprogramming mind control and deprogramming all these different things because I wanted to. I knew that it was necessary for me to, one, know my origins, that I needed to, my origins were like at a distance, but there was no such thing as time. So, you know, since time creates space, and then that creates distance, but if there's no time, then there's no distance. So I felt like that my origins was really just probably something that was foggy, that I had too much in the way of my origins, and I needed to work on that and clear that up. The second reason that I came up with of why do I study, just right off, because, you know, it's good to ask yourself questions before you have an opportunity to think about it. And one of the second response was to discover this long lost hidden power. That there's something about this awareness that comes to us that we have some type of spiritual powers and abilities that for us, it's probably going to make life more fun or make life more of an experience or give you a real insight to life. And in fact, many came on board into the awakening through just the awareness of having a third eye and a possibility of a third eye. It was just something everybody was talking about, like, man, I'm gonna open my third eye. You remember that? Those times, man, I'm gonna open my third eye. And, you know, that became big because that's at the core of the essence of what we are on this quest for. Is like, I'm on the quest also for my powers and my abilities. So even with those two things, just my origins, I want to know, you know, where my folks come from, how powerful was we? I need that story. I need to have that knowledge. Now we're living in a time of an antithesis. So people will tell you don't need that. They'll tell you don't need anything. And in many ways, they're right. It's a paradox that way. There's also that desire for an origin, to know what we came through, because they say, if you know what you came through, then you know who you are. And then when you know who you are, then you'll know the potential of what you can become. So that's what I've been on the quest for. I wasn't, that's what I was on the quest for, but I'm still on the quest. But today, I'm in such a clear state of consciousness, I can see through so many ideas of speculation. I call it speculative. They even have a term, they call it speculative Freemasonry. And I guess everybody that's in Freemasonry is speculative. And what this just means is that if we read a scripture, let's say it says, you know, Allah made Adam from a congealed clot, okay? So now someone's got to come and begin to speculate on that. So they speculated. They say, yeah, that congealed clot or Adam is the red blood, you know, and then it may be the red blood in itself of Mars, Ma'adim. So they'll break this thing down and start visualizing maybe Allah there, I don't know, with a huge bowl of congealed jello blood or whatever, and then forming and fashioning, and never realize that that's speculative. But you could see why, because that's like very romantic. You could see why that became big, just to speculate, to have the ability to use the mind to do like a dream and to begin to create pictures around things. But then we realized that there was an entirely different level of knowledge, an esoteric knowledge, if you may, a knowledge that said, let me show you that congealed clot. We're going to go into this laboratory. Let me pull this out of the freezer. Let me get a couple zygotes, shoot a couple formulas in here, give me some protein, throw this thing in the incubator. Now watch this. 2 weeks later, you see something growing in there. Right? Because that's not speculative. That's the master's knowledge. And you have to realize that all throughout history, you're going to always see those two things. So for those that want to understand how today's show adheres at all to the title, the two brotherhoods, the battle is the speculative and then the master. Now you would think that this is no battle at all. Like, I mean, somebody that can really do something versus somebody that claims that they can do something is two totally different things. But no, we're living in the world where the speculative or those that just have an idea of what goes on actually get the most attention. While let's talk about our yoga masters. Let's talk about our masters of Tai Chi, Naigang. Like, you don't really, you don't hear too much about them all the time. Right. So there is, in a sense, still even a conflict going on there between esoteric and exoteric. Now, obviously, one has the agenda to make sure that everyone that comes in contact with them or their system or their practices gains something. In a certain sense, goes vertical. Versus there's clearly another system that is just like, hey, you're only here for me. And I'm just going to give you this knowledge and information, but it's not going to be something that you can actually apply and do something with. It's just speculation. It's just entertainment. So what you don't want to be in all of this, I can't tell you what you don't want to be. I'll tell you what you don't have to be. It's just entertainment. But there is a level of awareness and a level of knowledge and mastery that will mean the most to you because you will get a chance to use it for yourself. And since the most important thing is you in the present, that means that this becomes an extreme treasure to you. It's actually your protection. At the purest level, protection, which I call the professional technology, is just the wisdom and the awareness of exactly how to navigate the experience without shipwrecking yourself. So this key to this long lost power, I first want to clean the slate for all of us and say, come into the space as if you're just beginning. That, yeah, you've been on a journey, but now this is what you came on the journey for. See, because like the journey itself, like, I don't know, the journey to spring break. In the car with everybody, you know what I mean? Y'all probably didn't rent it something. It's like the journey to spring break is not like spring break. So this has been a pretty incredible journey. And all of us, we have to have the courage and the honor to always come back into the space every time we learn something and talk about what we unlearned, right? Not continue to go on with the unlearning. That's like somebody who, they know their craft is fallible, does not work. And like some doctors, they've come into the awareness of the holistic path, but they're still, practicing that same, so they have the knowledge, but they're not applying it. So this application then has to come, it comes into this. I just want this to be crystal clear for you today, because remember, this is a refreshment. This is the refresher. Realize then that more than likely the problem with this world, one of the big problems is it has too much knowledge. Like if I wanted to really know, have you ever Googled a dream symbol that you had? Like, you dream of this, I don't know, I dream of a crocodile, right? So, you hit Google with this, I dream of a crocodile. What does it mean? The first thing, big disasters and dangers are coming your way, right? Oh no. Hopefully you don't have to go to work then. Hopefully you can keep Googling. So you keep Googling and you'll come up with the other one, which is the protectors are in your space and are around you, the ancient ones. You see what I mean? So it's like, okay, which one do I go with here? Because there's too much knowledge. So realize that it's not necessarily, as we're going to unveil even the metaphysical data set today, it's not about having all of the books. Having all of the books is equivalent to having Google. And then you go search all those books and you're going to get so many contradicting stories. You just need the books that all are connected to the original knowledge, and only those books, right? So the aspect of this that I'm coming at is first that the world actually has a lot of knowledge. And another thing is, which has become, to its detriment. And another thing is teachers don't really have the time to learn. I say that again. Teachers don't really have the time to learn. Think about, especially in the Western culture, professor. Professor is already spending 5 days out of the week working with these kids. He's stuck in the same traffic in LA that you may be stuck in. He gets home, he breathes the same air as you. He gets to 8 o'clock, maybe gets a little dinner, maybe pops on his favorite show or podcast. He's back to sleep. He's back there again, or she's back there again, right? Then Saturday and Sunday come along and everybody wants their piece. Everybody's like, hey, you coming over to Auntie Brenda's tonight? Hey, let's go check out, I don't know, the Red Sox. Hey, I need help on this term paper. You're my uncle. Hey, you see what I mean? So when is this professor ever getting a chance to go beyond his or her profession? Right? So this is another phenomenon. So just with these two phenomena alone, one, there's a lot of knowledge. So imagine even when this professor, he's finally like, I gotta go further. I can't teach second grade forever. I'm gonna go study and become something new. He's gonna get in the face of 1 million books, especially as a professor, because you got access to all the libraries. And guess what? You don't need 1 million books. You just need the right books. And if it just so happens that they're like a needle in the haystack, professor will never grow, really. Professor will peak. And as knowledge is always changing and wisdom and application is always changing, like the seasons, I mean, that there's not one specific thing you need to know. It's one specific thing that you need to know now. So if it's, as a farmer, if it's a certain season, all you need to know about is planting the crop for that season. That's what becomes most imperative for me. So as the season changes, even if you just have this one-dimensional knowledge, if you may, the season may change into a dimension of knowledge that you don't have. And man, I saw this happen. I saw when, even in my lifetime, that epochs turned and the technologies and the forms of energy and the way of connection and all those things changed right before our eyes. And then there were some who could not make that change. And rather than how those of us with big hearts think that someone would be there to stabilize them until they went on to the great beyond, they just got left. Some of them got fired, downgraded. And I watched all of this go on like a child in the world, just like, wow, why does that happen? Wow, why did that happen? Trying to find an integer that would make me have the ability to not make it happen to me. So here's some knowledge for you. Here's some knowledge that is wisdom if you apply it. How this is set up is, let's just say there's 2 different directions. The further you go in one direction, which we'll say is that's toward the source. We won't even harp on the words right now, but the closer you get to the source of the projection, the clearer things get. Now, it turns out that that's actually inward. So it's not something you're going to, it's something that you got to go inside to get. But the closer you get, the more clear things become, and the more pure it becomes. The more refined are the abilities and the pleasures and the connections and all of that. Everything that you know to be stimulus and experience just becomes more refined. And that's why I said earlier, if you think this world is bad, wait until you get a load of some of the others, because there's also another direction. We call it the horizontal. That's why horror and horror has the same horizontal, right? So horizontal is a set of knowledge that is basically like, instead of going vertical where things are consistently purifying themselves, I don't care what shape it is, if it's a circle, if it's flat or whatever. I just know as I go into the higher parts of this, I get these more refined elements, argon, helium, etc., hydrogen, etc. So it means that if I'm ascending, if you may, then I'm going to see more and more clearly. It's just a metaphor. Who cares what directions it's in? It's a deep level of a metaphor with us. But if we go horizontally, then we'll keep going on and we'll begin to age. Things won't get more clear. They'll actually get more distorted. But you're going further and further. It'll feel like you're even dead, but you'll keep going. That's the path of the horizon. So, and this is also symbolically what the sun goes through every day. Symbolically also and physically what the body goes through every day. It dies daily. Thousands of billions of cells die out. It's over for them. While new ones come into existence at every single moment. So I wanted to zoom in to just this awareness, though, that in a pure and unadulterated space, this would mean more than likely that your perception of everything that you think you want to know would be entirely different than it would be in a space that is suffering from some levels of distortion. Now, that's common sense, but I'm just saying that, is it possible that much of our perception about what can go on and what happens in the world is really controlled by dogmatic theories, theories of gods? What I say is, okay, so what I'm just saying directly, because I want to be very clear here, I got notes. So is our perception of advanced consciousness shaped probably by other things that other people have been seeing and even other people were seeing that showed them? How much of this knowledge and wisdom and awareness do we actually have that's not speculative, that we can actually say, this is exactly what went on. This is exactly what happened. Now, again, if we got dogma and we got mind control, we will have some level of tampering. But there's also, okay, so I want this to be very clear. Today, what I mean to express is that it's not that there aren't some very powerful things in existence and that there isn't a very mystical aspect to how we exist. I'm not here to refute that because I've gone through the experiences myself. What I am saying, though, is that what's generally, though, passed to people as experiences and what can be done and what should be done, especially on a spiritual level, have nothing to do with that. They generally have something to do with some type of dogma. But we know that the highest levels of occult knowledge, we know that chemistry, i.e. psychoactive substances, we know these kind of things actually produce different levels of results that are actually very tangible. So I'm saying chemistry, alchemy, and I'm saying psychoactive substance and certain levels of occult knowledge about symbolism, language, these kind of things have a real potent effect to them. But most of the knowledge that is actually being passed out has nothing to do with that. So the reason why we want to lay this path straight for our feet is that we got to realize that this is in real time, though. We're talking about us. I'm not talking about somebody else. I'm talking about Seven's experience in this. And then I trust that you'll be able to ask these questions to yourself and come to the same conclusions and be like, yeah, I think that honestly, especially after today, maybe we're just beginning. Because with this level of knowledge and this level of awareness, because it's very exact, it would equal an entirely different result. The distorted, unclear knowledge cannot get us to the highest levels of our experience. They're not, it's not possible for them. So when we move that out of the way, that's when we'll have it. So I also wanted to mention that, remember how I talked about how those worlds, they get worse. But I want to make sure that it's very clear that the worlds, as we know that there's a very deep connection between the word and the word worlds, all you have to do is add an L. It's just the awareness that your mind is the world that you're living in. When your mind ceases to be connected to this world, it's like you're in a dream. You're in there now. That's where you are. Your mind is now focused on the dream, what you're calling the mind, the consciousness, whatever name you want to give it today. It's there. It's almost dead to this. So this means then if one is in a distorted world, or as I said, going horizontal, it's because the knowledge and the wisdom that they have is distorted. So very directly, what would happen when an L becomes an R? If you know that in Hebrew and in Arabic, the difference between the two dialects is an L and an R in their respective language. That's almost like the left hand and the right hand. They call it the double-edged sword. These swords or these words, right, have power, but there were two dialects. And so in these dialectical transfers, if like in Spanish, the V makes the B sound, right? So if even the names that you knew of your ancient country or your ancient heritage or your ancient ancestor, if the name had been changed, like instead of their name beginning with an R, it begins with an L now, or instead of it beginning with a B, it has a V, or anywhere through that, what would happen to your consciousness? So this is sometimes looked over because sometimes language is not seen to be that powerful. And I was taken to a point of when I was a child, when, just to show how powerful the mind is, I always remember when I would get hurt, like I would fall or something like that, it would happen, and then I would wait for the rush of the pain. So like, let's say I slam my finger in the door, I would see my finger get slammed in the door and I wouldn't feel anything at first, but then I'd be waiting, like, here it comes, the rush of the pain. So it was almost like my mind was telling me that there was going to be pain for me to feel it. Now, as you get older, it becomes natural. You hit yourself and you pain right away. But of course, those who really train and really practice know that the pain comes from the mind saying that, hey, you just slam your finger in the door, no matter what condition the finger is actually in. So it's an awareness again that if you have control of your mind, it would really mean that you actually had control of the language and you had control of the words, and that the order of the language and the words that are in your mind would be in the right order. I've always mentioned this as, if anyone needs hope, is to remember that what has really gone on here on the planet and what can really get you to a greater stage within yourself can be articulated to you in English. So English is still a good enough language to where it can be articulated to you. English consists of 26 letters, A to Z. Now, you already know the 26 letters, you know A to Z. What you would just be missing then is the order of those words. Because those words or letters, excuse me, put in the right order will explain to you every single thing that ever happened here, everything that you need to know. So it's that close is what I'm saying. You have the tools that are necessary to know everything. They're that close. But what you need is the order. And the order of things becomes so important. I always say that it's very similar to the gestation process of a mother that is birthing the child. The child is developing certain things in a specific order. So for those who don't like order, what happens if your heart develops before something else? So there's an extreme order going on, and whether the rebel wants to have that order or not, the rebel will just stay immature. The mature beings, they know the order because they know nothing can come against the order. As long as you are modeling everything after the order and how it all works, you never meet disappointment. So that's what I was saying. It was about the balanced knowledge, because if you could get this knowledge, you would never find any disappointment. You would see people all around you having a bad time. Just like, I think there's a part, I believe it's in Revelation, but it comes out of another book. It says that the kingdom of heaven will come, but people won't see it. It will actually be here, almost like it's overlaying the reality that everybody else is in. And everybody else would appear to be in the same reality, but some people will already be in heaven. So they said the kingdom of heaven will be amongst you or around you, but you may not be able to see it because it's actually something that you experience. It's not something that you want to see. It's something that you want to experience. So when you get into your mind and you put things in order, then you'll have the potential to experience it. Because I always tell myself this, listen, if you're not continuously progressing, you can't keep going on like this. You need to get more and more refined and clearer and clearer. And until that happens, anytime you ask yourself, what should I be doing? the answer should be that. That's going to be the biggest thing for you. That's going to make the most impact. But for those who really are able to succeed in this, it will be because they pretty much did it themselves. It won't be because it means that they would have worked hard for it. Why? Because they would have balanced out. If you're going to work hard, it's going to work hard for you. If you're not going to work at all, then it's not going to work for you. And that's how the whole thing is. It's literally a reflector. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's the speculative, and the speculative makes you think that it works for those who don't really take time with it and really try. So this is the encouragement today of why you should stay persistent on this process of coming into awareness of exact knowledge. And most importantly, about your origins and about your power. So now, as you know, this is a part of the sovereignty series. And I felt that the most important thing was, because when you're dealing with sovereignty, first of all, you have to know what sovereignty really means. It probably doesn't mean exactly what you think. So it's important to know. That would be the difference, because now it's become a buzzword. People say sovereignty, we need our sovereignty. And it's just becoming the word. So we started to define what sovereignty is, but we need to basically make sure that we're putting this into the proper perspective once more if we're going to continue on this sovereign build. And it's one that when you really boil everything down around this word, what it has most to do with, especially in ancient times, was about protection. A sovereign actually meant someone that was responsible for taking care of others and everyone else, a whole village, a whole tribe, a family. And so more importantly, and very specifically, it was actually that they could protect, again, they could protect everybody and keep everybody safe. So I mentioned earlier that the purest level of protection is wisdom, because you know certain things that allows you to navigate through the space for you and those that choose to have you responsible for them. And you're always ahead of the curve. Something be taking place and you're only benefiting off of it because you already know what's going to happen. You already know the algorithm. That's a sovereign. So we have to think then that there would be then two different types of protection. There would be this external protection, right? Well, so first we mentioned the internal protection. The internal protection is having this wisdom. Even in a family, if we want to make this very basic, in a family that is very close knit, there's a skill, there's a trade, what we call I always forget the word every single time, but it's the skill or the trade that the family knows. They call it trade secrets. There it is again. Trade secrets, something that you can do, whether you can dye fabric, whether you can grow corn. There's something that your family can do that creates the value within your family that allows you to come to the farm with everybody else, because that's also where the sovereigns are. You get a chance to sit at the table with everybody else, like, okay, well, I grow this and I grow that. Let's make an exchange here. So very directly, there is that internal. So you're working on yourself, you're developing something, and then that comes to the betterment of everyone because it's actually at the same level, at least, of what everybody else is producing. That's actually what a sovereign is really about. So we're going to get into that a little bit more here in a moment, but there's the external one, and the external one just has to do with killing everybody. It has to do with who is the most strongest and the most threatening. You got to realize that the other level of protection, if it's not going to be wisdom, if it's not going to be staying ahead, that's why you really only have two choices here. Some people always say, well, 7, I need to understand how to protect myself, right? And the external one is definitely the bum route. Like the entire history of humanity is mostly full of the external applications of protection, which end up in warfare. So it's this internal application that we're looking for. So this professional technology then is the secrets of getting to the perfected states and the instructions on the journey very directly. Some will travel lateral, basically some will travel horizontal and not vertical, as we explained before. They will go on further in their journey, collecting lots of wisdom, lots of knowledge, if you may, but never really applying it. They will grow old and they will never see the benefits of what it is itself because they were speculating. While there are others that will go vertical. They will crystallize the knowledge. They will refine themselves with that knowledge, meaning that they'll actually apply that knowledge to themselves. And it would be as to them as if things were getting clearer and clearer, as if they were drawing closer and closer to something that was the ultimate. So these are the benchmarks. So here's a recap, because here's where we're going to begin this evening. Is just a brief recap on our first sovereign presentation here on YouTube. There was an awareness that in this sovereign field, because we're dealing in something that is really undefined, it has to become defined. There must be some type of measurement. So very specifically, we talked about that. First, I'll have to do this in order. First, we talked about that your mind is sovereign, is in a sovereign trust. That this mind that you have is actually a co-creative conscious mind. It has an extremely high value. And let's say the creators of the mind, if you may, decided that it could not be owned by anyone. So it is in a trust. So even if you get tricked into believing that something can own your mind, it would be a trick indeed. And you can go on with that until you wake up out of the trick. And then just like that, you can be released from the trick. So if something is saying, well, I have you, I owned you, you did this ritual, you did all of this, that's the jokers, if you may, trying to convince your mind that they have you. But none of that can be the case, because we've discovered unequivocally that the mind in itself does not belong to anything. So that's why the term is, if you free your mind, then the rest will follow. That's why wherever you think you're at, that's where you're at. When you're having a great time in your mind, you're having a great time. When you're having a horrible time, it's all got to be processed through the mind. And there's a reason for this, because your mind is basically the ultimate control point of the whole thing. You can always retreat to your mind. And so if you know how to control your mind, then you can always be in a pleasant vista no matter what's going on around you. Now, of course, there's a million excuses behind that, or why some person is not in the best state of mind, but it's for the record that it's because the mind actually belongs to no one. So we went on, and even coming from the mind, since let's say if that's some type of origin point, we know there's still a physicality. So the physicality comes into play. And when the physicality comes into play, because it's manifested from the mind, in order for someone to even say that they own the physicality, they have to go through this entire process. And we elaborated on that in our last sovereign build. And that process was also taking measurements. Even creating, actually, personally, first, creating a unique measurement system, a measurement system that is unique to you and the nation of your people, because the measurement system has every single thing to do with the energy and the power that is being evoked. So we see right now in the world, we have the royal cubic system, right? This is the system that was used in Kemet, or what you're calling Egypt. They also use the digit then. So if you're thinking that technology is new, think again. They were using what's called digits. And that word actually means grain. It actually also refers to your fingers, because you plant seeds, you create things. And this digit is the digital side of the reality. It's the ability to create things in a reality that actually in itself is quantum. It's only solid because the mind agrees that it's solid. That's why when you take any substance and the mind stops focusing on the solidity of this reality, it stops becoming solid. When you go to sleep, the reality goes altogether goes away and you're put into another reality. So again, these things seem very basic, but they are that renewal and that confirmation, like check. Okay, we good with that. Check. Now we understand this. The mind is a sovereign property. You're just working to get control of this. If you can get control of this, then you got everything. Some people say, well, that sounds so easy. Try not to think for 1 minute and see how easy it is. And then you'll realize, Samson, the Philistines are upon you, meaning that you have giants in your mind at this point, big ideas constantly bothering you and telling you, you know, who you are or who you're not, what you're supposed to become. Right? So being able to still your mind, literally make it still, stop it, is the power. So what we're talking about is the process of getting to that power. And then we're talking about, even when you get to the power, how is the world that is already created before you realize your power? How is it here? It's here because when you have an object with which all of our ancestors created that measures the sun, it is thus measuring the time, and thus the device itself becomes the object that is able to record space and time. So those sundials, those megaliths that actually measure the seasons, that's the only thing that our ancestors needed to make as above, so below. And so they would bring this measurement of space-time right into the place that they were in the nation that they were in. And that is how a world is developed. And that's no different from, you know, because you'll see the continuous thing roll out again. They always say it's holographic. Yeah, because you'll see the same thing rolling out again. You'll always get someone going somewhere, bringing their family, staking a claim, building a house, building a clock of some type. It's like some people, okay, listen. Some people think that clocks are to measure time, like the original use of a sundial, like they're measuring the seasons. It's like, think about how silly that is. We never think about just how silly that may be, that you got this big thing that you built and its whole goal is to tell you something that you already know. Like you look at the stars, so they were acquainted with the stars, so they already knew when spring, summer, fall, all that was going to come around. So this thing is not to measure what time of the day it is. It's to actually dial in the entire space-time. And once the entire space-time is put into place, that's why our ancestors, they use this cubit. Then they start messing with these sixes, right? Because that's the function-dating component. 6 is sex. And then they start regenerating these realities and begin to build them. Like you got all these trees all over the place. Many of these trees are the same. You got different trees. You got seeds. So you have basically a cog that is now connected with the clock of the universe, right? And so that's what these things are used for. So it's that awareness that, well, to be exact, to be a master, these are the things that are applied. And then once they're applied, then you get a chance to experience the results, because the results are a part of the order. In the mind first, then we come through, we dial in space-time. We create a measurement system, because in the space that you're in the foundations that you're in, the only one that can be given credit for creation is the creators. So this means that anybody coming after that cannot stake claim to something that is already created. So as we see in the Salian law, which is the salt priesthood, is that they measure above and below, in the air, in the sky, and they take claim over those spaces. They make a map because everyone must agree on what it looks like. Where is it? Where are you? I'm right here on the map. Where? At 455.2 pi, whatever latitude, and at this longitude, this amount of miles away from this milestone. You see what I mean? So there's a dialing in that's happening, and that's the dialing in that we're all agreeing to, and that agreement is based on measurements, ma'at. So we got the metric system, right? So because remember now, it doesn't mean that there's just one system. That lets us understand a lot about how Earth has been unfolding. Someone can create a system and then someone else will say, well, I want my own system. I'm about to dial in my own space and time. So those that want to develop the matrix, they develop the metric system. That's what the matrix is built on, is the metric system and all of those numbers. Those who wanted to build an imperial right? And you know who they are. Every time you say the aristocratic imperial system. So they just, here's our measurements. Their measurements be so far off. Like if you ever use a millimeter versus an inch, it's just like, man, where are we at here? How can I be even exact here? Just a rush to create a system that is unique to them so they can try to dial in space-time before they even know what else to do after that. And this sometimes even seems like our pursuits, you know, it's like, I'm going to blast off to this other planet. It's like, what are you going to do when you get there? I don't know. It's like, we got to dial into this a little bit more. So our ancestors were very, very precise. And then finally, some of the oldest systems, which are the customary systems. So at this stage, then, since it's that vast, so we just recapping on last week, the mind and the measurements is how space-time is dialed in. So if we're not going to be talking about that and we're not going to be diving into that, then we need to be doing something that is going to get us there, get us to that ability of how to even stake claim over your own space, whether it's your bedroom, whether it's this property that you buy. That's why they're showing you, they got this thing. It's like a joke now. You can become a lord or a lady. You know, you can order it online. And according to the laws, all you need to own is like a plot of land like this thick over in Britain somewhere, and then file also the rest of the paperwork. And now you're officially a lord and a lady. So there are things that you can do that are still stand to this day about how you claim your space or how you claim your rights, if you may, because that's the ritual. And I'm going to talk today a little bit about, you know, these rituals that Earth has going on and what they're actually doing, because it is also when you're trying to dial into something that happened 500,000 years ago, you need to set the dials perfectly. And that's what a ritual is. It's like dialing in the energy of that space. There's a certain smell, there's a certain time. And it's like, let's move all these integers around that control space and time so that we can recreate 5,000 years ago right now. So that's the rituals and that's the rites. So in all of this awareness, again, there has to be something, and I'm sure like, that's why I always tell myself, man, I wonder why you didn't think about this sooner. But I was having this situation where I have these books that some of them consist of thousands of pages. I know the knowledge is exact because I've been studying so long. I know when I'm reading someone who knows, and I know when I'm reading somebody who doesn't know. Some of these these works are voluminous, and some of them I haven't even got to completing. I'll be like, man, I wish, you know, that's 500 more pages to get through, you know, in this life that we're living in now. And I realized that, first of all, there's a phenomenon that's going on really with knowledge anyway. And that's, first of all, that most knowledge is not really digitized. Like authors really don't like digitizing their books because then they become freely available online from whatever site is uploading them as a PDF. So as a standard, most authors don't like their works to be digitized. And then the older works that are digitized, or excuse me, the older works that are scanned in are generally not digitized, meaning that the text is not recognizable. The computer reads the page generally like a picture, not like text, because the text hasn't been typed in for the non-technical people. So there's this process where you can have a computer basically use a process to image that text and then identify that text and that word, and that's called optical correction, or OCR. So in this process, you would then take something that would appear. So the first step is to take the book. The second step is to then scan the book in with some type of professional scanner that can identify the text. And then the final step is putting the text into a format that it can be searchable. And then the cherry on top would be able to add some type of algorithm, some type of machine learning, or some type of artificial intelligence to be able to prioritize the knowledge. Okay, so that is the metaphysical data set. So as of right now, what you're looking at in this system that I have here that is rapidly growing, strong AI, is 6,000 pages approximately of not all of the knowledge, but the real knowledge, the knowledge that is really necessary and needed in this time. And so when I query this database about anything, it not only tells me what I want to know, especially since I'm very proficient in etymology and I'm very proficient in words and linguistics. It also tells me that across all of these different volumes that are not related, come from different segments in time, some of them even 200, 300 years apart, maybe even more, but to all start bearing witness to something specific. So basically, if I'm following a trail, the trail becomes concluded really fast when every place that I go to get the information about that path is all revealing that path. And the path comes to a conclusion. So this is literally like, it's removing all of the confusion. It's removing the thousands and thousands of fictional books and fictional works that are within the world that are actually being perpetrated as real spiritual works. And in most cases are just speculative themselves. Glorious stories that still don't give you the meat of what you need to know, like your origins, where you came from, not everybody else. And then also your power and how to apply that. So again, today, congratulations to everyone that has been a part of the continuous build. We have been able to deploy this. We'll see a little bit of what it can do tonight. And most importantly, it will keep growing from here. But see, we don't want a contaminated data set. So what I've been doing is I'm only bringing in, next that's going to come in are these dictionaries that I have. And these dictionaries, you know, they just get right to the point. And the dictionaries mixed in with some volumes that are actually explaining the story that are related to the word, you get the complete picture. Then you move on. Instead of being still back at that moment, wondering, I don't know what color that person was, whether they were the friend or the enemy, whether they were really the good ones or the bad ones, and all of that that goes through the mind that gets the mind tripped up. So this, for the metaphysician, is the greatest tool in this case, because it'll allow them to, in the time in which the teacher does not have the time to study, it gives them something that can really get them right to what they need to know fast. I have hopes of deploying the metaphysical data set publicly, and we will continue to use the metaphysical data set in what we're doing. So let's get to this tonight because we have a little bit to cover. It's already 8 o'clock. And we said we were going in. We had to give a quick prelude to all of this. So let's go. I'm going to upload only one image here. I don't have really many images here tonight. I only have just the ones that are going to zoom into what I'm talking about. So something interesting comes up when we think about this concept of bloodlines. It's like a tree. It's like you're looking at the entire existence like a tree, and you're seeing how everything is like folding back into something. Like you see these gateways. Like I notice how like you have the trees, and then you have the insects, and then you have, let's say, some of the amphibian and the reptiles, and then you have the mammals. So you literally have like this transition process. Some may miss that insects are the transition for trees to come into this world with eyeballs and all the stuff that, you know, we identify as being something with reason or consciousness or alive even, you know. You even see insects that mimic trees, not because they're just trying to copy trees, but because they were trees. You can't be looking like anything that you are not or were not at some point. So we got stick bugs, we got butterflies that look like, you know, leaves. But it's because there's a transitional process as this thing is literally, as they say, climbing or crawling from the goo of existence or the new, which are the primordial waters of existence, coming all the way through existence and then keep going up the chain. So it's interesting that tonight we're going to dig in a little bit into Canaan. But this word, and that's why I said, man, we gotta take a moment to step back real quick off of this, this topic, sovereignty, because there's way more to this than maybe most think. Even within the words, like when we're using words like Canaan, what do these words mean? Like, so I just said one word. One word is chain. Like, what is a chain? A chain is something that is connecting, right? It's a bunch of pieces connected together to drive something else. That word chain is the word Cain, right? You look at it, you just remove the H. So we know Cain is also from Canaan. When we say, hey, we're reading these canons, the canons are Canaan. The word actually is just specifically CNN, which actually refer to the red. They say that has a lot to do with a specific, even a dye. They say it has also to do with Mars. There's many different things that are connected into Canaan. But even the CNN logo is red. So there's a level of knowledge, there's a level of awareness and wisdom here, and it is in every aspect hidden from the uninitiated, the one who does not know how to read through the symbols. And even what we're seeing now as a symbolism is not even the deepest symbolism yet. Like, for instance, let's give some examples. This first picture that I was sourcing today on the thumbnail. Let me move this to another area. Give me 1 second. Move this down here. Okay. So I had this image in the thumbnail, right? Ooh, Naga. Yes, for sure. There's a lot here, but there's something very important going on here. Now, first of all, this reveals deep levels of knowledge and wisdom. Not only can you see the pygmy bees sitting in the back, this is right here at the top in the center above the Naga's head. There's another entity there. That entity is known as beast, which is a pygmy, right? Then we also see a sun and a moon, a sun on the left side, a moon on the right side, okay? As we keep scrolling down, we see what is actually a knot. I've put a video of Praveen Mohan, who's just, cool brother, man, doing a lot of research all the time in India, just be up in the temple, like all the places, especially in the Tamil Nadu in the South India, where they've forgotten where the darker Indians are. And this is where the temples have been abandoned with the cymatic still in them. And what you'll find is, and there are many of these, and there are these knots. And so what he did was he did this experiment where he had this notion that these were knots, and they are for sure knots. And he started putting them all together. Like he started just grabbing some rope and putting it into the same knots as were in many of these temples. And what he was noticing is that many of these knots were the same knots from even today in the Boys and Girl Scouts. More importantly, the knots from nautical engineers. Like when you're sailing boats, there's different knots for different things. If you remember, that's a big part of history that's kind of missing for us is, for many of us, we didn't get taught how to tie knots. We got taught to tie our shoes. That's it. But there are other knots, and there's a reason why. The weaving is a knot. It's a certain type of interlocking knot. And you can create clothes like even Nike right now, they're using the fly stitch. When you look at the fly stitch, they patent the fly stitch. The fly stitch is stolen from these knots, right? And these shoes, if you got some fly stitch shoes, they just never die. It's like they're still sitting in there like comfortable as ever, looking raggedy, but super comfortable and never ripping or anything because of the way that the knot is put together. But see, for the ancients, the knot had a very deep meaning because it's the key to how to braid DNA. Okay, so before I get too far ahead of myself, again, in temples, you can look up Praveen Mohan and see his work on knots. It's on Secret Energy. There's these different symbols of these serpents, right? Now, this symbol of the serpent in this empire is the same as the symbol of the bird in the one that we're in now, except for in our world, the serpent is demonized. In their world, the serpent was revered for a multitude of reasons that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But in every tense of it, so if they were going to show what they revere the most, they were going to always show at the height of power 2 snakes, because it meant that 2 empires, if you may, or 2, they used to call it the 2 Egypts, the 2 centers of the world, which were still seen in themselves to be serpentine or energetic, had come together and had formed and created something. So let's look at this again. We notice there's a reference here to being about the sun and the moon, because the sun and the moon give off 2 opposite energies that are needed to create life. The sun and the moon also symbolically become the male and the female. And you'll notice if you look very closely that the knots on one side are not going in the same direction as the knots on the other side. Okay, because this is about how to tie 2 forces together that are really opposing forces. Okay, so to be honest, the knowledge that a lot of times that those who moved on from speculation are searching for is that knowledge. That's why things have gotten to this point now with DNA. It's like you can have everything you want in the world, you know, externally, but to go into the holiest of holies, to go into DNA and to be able to create the things that you want, living and breathing, would be like being a god, because that's what the gods did. So let's clarify with the data set very briefly of how we know that. Let's put the data set to use right away. We want the data set to tell us about these tying of knots, because since I already connected the knots to DNA, I have to, for a moment, connect the Naga with the time in the world where it's recorded that the DNA had been tampered with, if you may, or changed. Okay, so when I'm coming to here, because I've already done my work, so I'm not just gonna come on here today and start Googling everything, even though we'll put the raw power to the test. But right now we're just going to a bookmark. This bookmark says Nagas and Hermon. That could say even better, Nagas on Mount Hermon. So for those of the occultists out there, they know that there's this situation that goes on Mount Hermon in every single spiritual ancient book, including the Rig Vedas. And the Mount Hermon becomes also where we get the word harmony from. Now, I've always wondered why the word harmony has harm in it. And it definitely has to do with the corruption of the word, because every time you get this word that means bringing life, but now it means taking life, you know that there's been some corruption to the word. And for some reason, that seems to always happen to any knowledge around the Nagas. And that's going to come for a reason that's quite evident as we continuously go through this build today. But we have to establish that, because the Bible did not identify those angels that were on Mount Hermon. They just said that there was these angels that came down and they did some things. So let's just read it from here. Let me just pull up my keyword here. Actually, let me just go here. I go on my data set. I type in Hermon. And let us look here. We're going to read here. Now, I will say that I am not proficient in Hindi, Sanskrit, or those languages. So when I'm reading something, I may just fall down the word. So just know that I'm not, a linguist in Hindi, but I'm trying. I'll get through the process. Okay. I know how to sound out. So we're going to read here very, very briefly, because this is an important time in humanity's history. This is what actually brings us here today as human beings. Somebody had to do the work. Somebody had to tie the knots. The knots are the DNA. They are the weaving of how you put different life forms together in order to create. all right now, any kind of secret societies or whatever, this is the knowledge that they were looking for, was how to braid DNA properly so that it is good, so something will happen, so something will come into existence. So it says Lanka is said to be located near the Mount Trikuta, or the three-peaked mountain. Trikuta was apparently the same as Trikukaba, the Trikukaba mountain of the Vedic text, for its sense having three humps like peaks. And the meaning of its name pointed to Hermon mountain in Lebanon. Okay, Mount Hermon is well known for its three rounded peaks on the top. The description of Trikuta mountain as rich in minerals value agrees well with the Athra Veda's description of the Trikabu as a source of salve, and that of Stibian, which is alimony, from which salve used to be made, was a high-priced luxury commodity of the ancients, the gift of salve in Beni Hassan's reliefs in Egypt. The myth of Kadru, the mother of the Nagas, revealed that the Trikudra, the three Kadru in the Rig Veda, was another name of the same three-peaked Hermon mountain. Lanka and Sanka both are Gotra names in the Panini's list of Gotras, which indicated that both were place names. Both names in the epic Purana signify or mean serpent. That is, both were places in ancient Lebanon or cuneiform country, Nagas. Okay, let me just check this out and see if I need to read any further here. Okay, so what we're confirming here just by this text is that it was the Nagas who end up coming down on Mount Hermon, and that is confirmed in the Rig Veda, but is not confirmed in the Bible at all, or in any of the Hebraic texts. Now, what we're going to see is let me see, Naga. Give me 1 second. Actually, let me just go to my bookmarks here. The next thing we're going to confirm is that the Naga actually are Seraphim, which in the Hebraic text, it actually speaks of the Seraphim being the highest of the angelic classes, right? So there's Seraphim, there's the Cherubim, there's even the Rephim, there's the Nephilim, and then there's the Ish, okay? So Seraphim are way up there. But watch how, again, that if you don't know any of this knowledge, or you're not able to get the ancient text, then they have one over there thinking the Seraphim, I mean, who knows? They're like these, I don't know, they're like these European angels that fly around with big wings. That's like Seraphim right now. But look at what Pierre says here in Holographic Culture. According to the apocryphal account of Amram, the reptile is said to rule over all of mankind, a species indicative in the biblical exegesis of the Elohim, the lofty ones, the plural noun used to specify God. So he has a image here. It's the stone carving in India, the Naga Sanskrit or serpent, a deity equivalent in the Judaic traditions to the Seraphim, a serpent or non-human angel. Okay, so shared in common with many other types of angelic beings in the Middle and the Far East, the Watchers are virtually identical in the Judaic traditions with the Urim and the Elohim types of the Seraphim. Each of these classes of divinities are all registered with light and correlated with sight. Okay, because what is DNA? DNA is light. So to be able to manipulate DNA, you need to be able to manipulate light. And that's why they later on become known as the Axari, which means the Brotherhood of Light, which is today what we get as the Illuminati, because now the whole thing is corrupted. All of the place that this knowledge came from, just like you see Dindar, was destroyed and burnt to the ground. They burnt even the people. And there's recordings of that. They tried to blot the Nagas or NGS out of the documents of everything, and that became the missing link. Because if you don't know what happened, like if you don't know where everybody came from, then you won't really know anything about where we're going or what happened or what's going on. And this is what, again, that we're here to clarify. So we only established two things here at this point from the data set. And that's one, that on Mount Hermon, specifically, it was the Nagas who were on Mount Hermon, and specifically that the Nagas are Seraphim, and specifically that the Nagas work with light. And specifically, they work with light in a way of tying knots. And specifically, that tying knots is tying bloodlines together. Symbolically as 7 here as a 7, because that was known as the 7 rivers. Why? Because there are 7 outflows of the Nile. Okay, so there's 7 outflows of the Nile River. So also the Nile, let's look what the data set says about the Nile. So because where this knowledge is lost in is it's lost in the priestcraft's translations in the Rig Veda, which begins to change all the names to something they can still recognize, but because of the linguistics, most people can't. So, and then they think that at times when we're talking about people, most people think that we're talking about people at times when we're actually talking about places. For instance, Saraswati, as it states here, is really the Nile. And let me go to my bookmark here 1 second. Actually, let me just jump into my bookmarks here. Let me see, Nile. There it is, 488. This was me, and after putting the data set together, which took an immense amount of scanning, 2 days to crack through mega mysteries. The Egyptians from very ancient time, the 6th dynasty text, thought the underworld, this was another thing, thought the underworld was located in Nubia. So right now, that's taught exactly opposite. It's taught right now that Lower Egypt is the underworld, which is, of course, where Heliopolis is. But Heliopolis was known as actually being heaven. So in Nubia, Nubia was the underworld. So it says the place, Falaga, played an important role in the Rig Veda myth of Indra's conquering of the Falaga. The same place is represented in late Egyptian texts as Philag or Pilak, since the hieroglyphic signs do not distinguish between a G and a K. Egyptian Philag, like many other Nubian place names in the New Kingdom text, reflects its earlier Rigvedic name. The Greeks made it shorter to Philae, which has been proven to be the same place by comparing Egyptian myths of the origin of the Nile and the Mahabharata myths of Plaksha, the source of the Swati, that is the Nile. Saraswati, the Rig Veda name for the Nile, for the river Nile, and the myths of the origin of Saraswati demonstrated remarkable similarities, which the Egyptian idea of the origin of the Nile from the underground abyss through the double caverns of Philae, because it said that the Nile actually begins underground, right? And since the Nile was the flowing of life, or these 7 rivers, the origins of where they started was known as the underworld, because the underworld is the womb. It is the incubator where everything begins, right? So on this, it's also saying that, see, in the Hindu text, Abraham's wife is Saraswati. So it's not even, you're not even seeing that these are not people. These are places. Because anybody that ever became a ruler in these places, they named themselves after the place. So if you became the ruler of California, you would call yourself King Cali. You see what I mean? That would be your name. You would take on a new name in the ritual, because when you took on the name of the place, you became identified with the place. So let's go in. So now that is cleared up for you, that again, that there's a great atrocity happening within the text. We have to then understand that let me show you the exact awareness of that in history. That, okay, so what did the historians say about this? Like, why did they erase this history? Okay. And just how, like I said, you have this knowledge in your mind, and sometimes you just need to know where to put the knowledge. One of the things that when I started meditating on these knots for a while and thinking about every time that I heard of a knot, one of the first things that came to mind was the Gordian knot. Because I just remember that from like history class or something like that, the Gordian knot. I didn't even know what it was related to, so I went and looked it up. What is a Gordian knot? Now, the first thing that I saw was this knot right here, which is also another one of the knots that are inside of the temples, right? So it meant that somebody even took the knot from the temple and even bought it out, right? So that was a Gordian knot. Now, if you look at this also, what it looks like is actually a bunch of snakes twined together, right? But what is the definition of the Gordian knot? The Gordian knot that gave its name to a proverbial term for a problem solvable only by a bold action. Alexander the Great, on his march through Anatolia, reached Gordium, and he coined this phrase, cutting the Gordian knot. It's basically to a bold solution to a complicated problem. What was that complicated problem? What was the bold solution? To cut them, to erase them. So when we're thinking about this, instead of trying to relate it only to a people, relate it to your DNA. That the cutting and the splicing of the DNA is wrapped in the pun of the Gordian knot that, oh, we got some problem with these people. Oh man, all this confusion with all these different people, the serpent people from this place and these people. What's going to be the solution? Let's cut them. A bold solution, one that is so dastardly, you would never even believe it happened, that you can try to cut out somebody completely from history. So as you can see, this was a bold action that also came back to bite, as all things of this nature do, that removal of something so powerful and awareness of something so powerful took humanity in a whole different state. And I'm going to show you how this begins to unfold. The first thing is to be aware of, again, the first sovereigns. Okay, the first sovereigns. What does this word mean and what is this all about? It starts off with a term that we use today called the Hyksos, also seen as the Hyksos kings, right? Like, and even today, George Bush and his family try to actually connect their lineage to the Hyksos kings, because the Hyksos kings was actually, in history, the ones who dominated the most in their time at rewriting most of the ancient knowledge only by taking on its semblance. So the Hyksos kings, more specifically the Ishvaku, that's what they're called, the Ish, because they're even lower than Nephilim. The Ishvaku kings were known as the city kings. I heard that name remind me of the city girls. I was like, well, shit, we got the city girls now. Is that anywhere close? Nah, the city kings. What are we talking about? We're talking about in history that it appears that the entire, after we're, let's say, off of the Federation of Ma, which is Alma, or the love of the mother. Once we're fresh off of that, the world becomes overrun by kings. And these kings are in it with themselves as either sovereigns and brothers or enemies of each other. So let's look at the data set real quick and let's see how the data set explains that there actually were 33 kings in the Naga Empire. So it says the Akkadian equation of the identification of Seski with the moon god also confirms that the land of the god Sesha, or the Egyptian land of He, and the land called Nun were just different names of the same land. After all, the Egyptian names were not that fanciful as I thought before, but very meaningful. The significance of this Egyptian region, as revealed by its many names, is many languages drew the attention to the Mahabharata list of the Naga kings, translated as serpent kings. The 33 kings in this group were then once real kings of Kush, or kings who descended from the kings of Kushite origin, which could be a valuable subject for future research. And so very clearly, let's keep reading. The god He in India, the only way the snake god Sesha or He could come to India is through the migration of the snake people, the Naga or the Nahesi. Certainly they came via Syria, the state of Nahas. The Naga is also a name of the god Sesha, which corresponded to the Akkadian divine names Ninnugi and Innugi. The myth of the Nahush turning into a great snake indicated that the Nahush was identified with the god Sesha, since the great snake was an epithet of Sesha. The Akkadian deity Naha'is corresponds to the king Nahush. Now remember, Moses raises the Nehushtan. This is just how watered down those texts are. He raises the brazen serpent to cure all the people, but that's a direct plagiarization of the Nubians' tradition. Also, Nubian means gold, and their worship of a gold immortal god known as Sesh, which was known to be a Naga and was amongst 33 kings, which these 33 kings became the reason why Freemasonry adopted the 33 degrees of the spine, because the spine was actually seen to be actually the body of a snake. But only a third of the body of the snake was actually on earth, while the other 66 of it, or 2/3 of it, was actually within heaven. That's what their ancient texts are talking about. And it's talking about the 33 degrees of the rising of the spine of a sovereign, which is basically learning how to stand, okay? A serpent that is erect. This is why they talk about how the serpent lost his feet and he was cursed and all this. This is because their gods cursed the ancient gods. The Ishvaku kings became the city gods, and then they cursed all ancient gods. Now look at what a real sovereign would consist of, so that you can understand even today the laws that exist. We go here to Min, which is the term that we're using, MN, or man. This word is even in woman, so it includes all those who go by this term, possibly, unless you've been classified as something else. So we go here and it says Manu in the Egyptian Min, or MN. Remember, there's no vowels in the ancient languages. To understand the above myth, the mythical Manu needs to be decoded. The Near Eastern context leads to the identification of Manu with the Egyptian Min, or Minis, okay? The legendary first king and unifier of the two Egypts, who was considered to be the ancestor of all Egyptian kings, okay? So very clearly, it's stating that the first sovereign was the one who united the upper and the lower kingdoms. Now, if you wanted to see that physically on earth, that meant the both Nile, or the both Egypts, the upper and the lower Egypt, respectively. But if you wanted to go metaphysical, it was about the first one to unite both of the worlds. Like when they talk about, because there's a power here. Like, we're not searching for the power in these words and in this story. We know the power. We're not searching for the power per se. We know the power exists. If you do not know, go and have your own journey or experience and then come back and just confirm, okay, the power exists. Now, what are the details to this? So the details become, okay, so men, though, that term is a reference to a being that is a sovereign that has enough power and ability to unite forces that are otherwise in conflict. So this is the same as a parent, or a wise parent, coming in as the arbitrator and the mediator between two quarreling children, okay? So very clearly it says all subsequent Egyptian kings. So anyone who was to take on this role, all subsequent to be a man, okay, which is not a sex. All subsequent Egyptian kings, after assuming the office, performing a customary ritual to legitimize his descent from Min at his city in Memphis, Egyptian Min Nefer. Okay, so very clearly, just if we're talking about men and you say that you want to become a man, they're saying directly here that there was a ritual to becoming a man. And this is, of course, why in our tribes, right, in all nations, whether they're Gaelic, Celtic, Ethiopian, any of these sects have rites of passage, meaning the rite is to dial in the energy that connects you. So look at what it says. It says that the Puranic concept of Manu as a great sovereign reborn in every Yan to preside forever over the kings who were his descendants closely resembles the ancient Egyptian custom regarding men and the meaning of men as the abiding one, the everlasting one. In the Rig Veda, Manu, or Manus, also seems to be a title of the highest king, since it has been applied for several living sovereigns, possibly a title adapted by the foreign monarchs of Egypt. There are descriptions that various gods who were kings assembled around Manu, performed many feats for him, and Manu's selection as Agni as the chief priest was a celebrated event. That all men are his sons is a latter priestly speculation of the Rig Veda and Manuspita, and the father Manus is revealed by the similarity of the Greek god Menes and Men. Manus of the Rig Veda, very likely a title of the supreme king. So very directly, what it's also saying is, to make that relevant to you in the new Egypt, which is America, when they say in the Constitution that we see it evident that all men are created equal, do you see why that if they're classifying only the people who have done the rites of Memphis as men, that everybody else would basically be classified as something else? So is everybody else classified as something else according to the Constitution when it's broken down? The answer is yes. Everybody else is classified as chattel or 3/4 of a human, but not a man. So you see how people would look at the Constitution and say, well, yeah, it's evident we're all created equal, because they're assuming that, yeah, they're referring to us. But actually what they're doing is they're skirting around the ancient laws of kingship that actually say that in order to really be a man, then you needed to actually be able to perform the rites of Memphis, because that would actually put you at the table as a sovereign of all of the kings that have ever come to the world, which are the only sovereigns, kings and queens respectively. And what this means is one who has the ability. Now, externally, this eventually unfolds to the protection, the one who can protect everybody. So now you can see how all this starts going into a whole nother direction. Because the Ishvaku is a city king. That's the term. Let me see if I can get that a definition for you real quick. I'll get that actually in a moment. The term is Ishvaku. It's actually the ancient term for Hyksos. So if you ever wanted to follow the Hyksos king's progression, you wouldn't be able to use that word Hyksos because it's not known before a certain time. The one that is the term is Ishvaku. And what it meant is a city king. So let's look at it real quick. Let's see if we can just get that. Because see, when I'm talking about something, oftentimes I feel like people are like, how does he know that? And I will say in many ways, I've actually known things before I ever found them written somewhere. But man, to one day actually find it written somewhere is really the confirmation that, man, you know what? You really, really are on to something, because here it is. It's explaining it to you, and it's giving you even those small little bits that you may be missing, which are so, okay, so it's Ishvaku city. Let me just see, city kings that are so valuable, right? So right here, there it is. So again, so when you have a reference, and then that's why I was saying about once you have a reference, then somebody else is trying to tell you, no, it's really this. And it's like, well, show me your source. And then you're like, well, look, everything that's in this source doesn't even match up with the original sources. So look, it says, okay, so let's go up here just a little bit. The city kings are Marna and Herod. Actually, you know what? I think it's maybe one more of these. Let's go here. Okay, so let's just find the reference here, which meant in the Hyksos system, the city kings, Ishvakus. Okay, so Janakas were a branch of the Ishvakus, which meant in the Hyksos system of city kings, okay? Now, it turned out, and it says also, Janaka was only a king of the Videya, a district of Nubia, under the Hyksos head of Egypt. And this is because Nubia at a certain stage becomes overrun and populated with many foreign kings who then take on the titles of the land themselves and even begin to follow the customs, but they themselves are foreign kings. They are not actually the native kings that were in that land. This is the eventual demise of Nubia. So very clearly, the reason why we want to hone in on Ishvaku kings is because what we're dealing with right now with the leadership system, even the term Maga, is a direct reference to the Ishvaku kings. And the Ishvaku kings always worshiped Set for a reason, or also known as Seth, because Seth is technically, and I was laughing about this the other day, like if you ever seen the band Earth, Wind, and Fire, like the main singer is dialing in Seth, whether you understand it or not. Like some people see that Seth and Satan and all that kind of stuff, and, and this is because Set's kingdoms was pretty much the model kingdom of what we do today in the world, because Set was all about one, because Set later on ends up becoming Indra. Set was about drinking the Soma. Very specifically, it lays this out why the Soma is blood and all this kind of stuff. The Soma was wine produced only in Nubia. So Nubia had this art of making this wine. And so when this Ishvaku king came into Nubia, he was always drinking this wine, okay? Another one of his traits was he was known as the pig, okay? This is interesting because that's probably how most women would see the whole Seth culture. That's actually what they deem it as today. Like, these guys are pigs. But literally in history, Seth ran under the symbol of a pig, okay? Now, it's interesting because Jay Electronica has a lyric as a sidebar here, and he says, men with the face of pigs spat acid that lasered my third eye closed, okay? So what does that mean? So look at this where it says, gradually became apparent that none of the ethnic names of the epic Puranas was from India. They all came after the place names, peoples and divinities of the ancient and Near East. The significance of the ethnic names such as the Sukara or pig and a Sukara Muku or pig face is impossible to understand without understanding the divinity signified by these strange names. The Near Eastern contexts make it easy to understand that the divinity was the Egyptian god Seth, whose symbol was a pig. Kadesh Treaty on Ramses II revealed that Seth was the symbol, was some type of strange pig-like animal. Now, remember, when you see this, the Setian monster, as they call it now, and in the statue of Set, people don't understand, well, what is this creature? Because it's got an elongated snout and no one can determine what it is because it's actually a form of the pig that is now extinct. And Set's whole thing was like always a party, meaning he danced a lot. He's known as the dancing god, also called the satirical goat, which you're going to see here in a moment, meaning that there was always a dance. It also talked about that sex was Set's magic, that Set had this thing going on with the girls, and that's the kind of magic that he was into or that he used. So notice how it says here very specifically, as its continuity broke down linguistically, it says, the Near Eastern context make it easy to understand that the divinity was the Egyptian god Seth, whose symbol was the pig. Kadesh Treaty of Ramses II revealed that Seth was a symbol, was a strange pig-like animal, was a chief god of the many Syrian cities, right? Because this is where many of the Ishvaku and even the Nagas were in Syria. Like the prefix VI, the word Pada in the Rig Veda denoted a place such as the Ilis Pada, which according to all scholars was a place. Even Panini used the word to indicate various types of states and sediments, such as the Janapada and the Mitrapada. The modern scholars interpret the Pada feminine and the Pada objective for its classical sense foot, and that has created quite a few fabulous names among the Rig Veda and the Puranic names, such as the god Aya, Ekpada of the Rig Veda has translated one-footed goat. Now remember, the only one-footed goat that we hear about in ancient texts is the Queen of Sheba. But because this place that they're talking about is in Nubia, then this makes sense that the one-footed goat, the name certainly meant Aja. So even technically, riding the goat is drinking ayahuasca. Do you get where all of this is this the root of where this is coming from? It says the Aya, which is the goat, is a name of the god Mina, and the Ekpadas are a people of the Puranas. From the importance of the Eka kings and the Pali myths, it became clear that as a race of Ekas were Homer's Achaeans. The Ekpada and the name of the Gotra and the name of the Pali Jataka or Jataka indicated a place of these people somewhere in the Syrian Palestine and supports a similar name, which is Ipt, right? So it goes on. And so it's basically saying, okay, so now we have this Ishvaku king who always runs a specific type of show in ancient times. Parties, girls, wine, gold, music. So any king that was aspiring to kind of take their empire in that direction became Set, named themselves Set, went through the ritual of Set. You see what I mean? So it's like, it's not that it's not only one God, because also in this ritual, whatever the ancient God or ancient father, etc., mother, whatever that was doing that, yes, the person would activate that energy through the ritual within their DNA. And they would fully become it. So that's what I'm saying. Now, go back and look at Earth, Wind, and Fire September again. Look at the lead singer, and you can, or a couple of other songs, look at the lead singer, and he's dialing it in. Now, I'm not here to explain to you which one is good and which one is bad, because humanity has been slammed into that forever. That's just going to fuse out the system. What I'm here to do is to connect history so that we understand, or her story, so that we understand exactly what is going on here, so that way we can understand where we're at. Because what continues to ensue inside of this empire is nothing but quarrels, or inside of this space is nothing but quarrels. But its original, look at this right here, the original, okay, so the symbolism, the symbolism of the serpent, or the words meant to strike. And this is because after these kingdoms begin to melt down, many of the Naga armies became mercenaries. So many of these Ishvaku kings in their territories respectively would hire these entire armies of mercenaries, and these mercenaries were very formidable. They studied war, they studied weapons. And because they were from Nubia, and Nubia meant the gold snake, it was already associated that the snake had two sides. It could either save you or kill you. And the reason of that was because the initial, as you still see that's present in the Hindu text, the initial creative component came from the tribes of what is said to be the serpent. And likewise, much of the brutal destructions and murdering and pillage, etc., of the most proficient class. This is like, if you think about samurai, right, where they're trained ninja, all these are, ninja means Naga. Do you see what I mean? So these are all the same words, but it's telling a story. So it goes here and it says, in the murder of reality, the offspring of Venus, which is Lucifer, in the Roman Egyptian mysteries, constitutes the incarnation of the god or the king. Now, we've heard this before. Defined as the carpenter, Jesus in the Gospel of Mark is presented as the son of Joseph, a carpenter, dubbed in the Aramaic as the Nagar. And this is because the Nubian Nagas were known to be builders. That's why they had all these temples and all this stuff. But at the root level, they were builders of DNA with light. But that transcended into building cities and building things, or carpentry. So even when the Nagas inhabited the Ishvaku kingdoms, it was because they were craftsmen inside of those kingdoms, or carpenters. As shown in the preceding paragraph, the title Nagar plays on the Hebrew noun Noga, which is another word for Venus, suggesting that the birth of God, Jesus' ascension, the second coming, is described in the book of Revelation as the morning star. Additionally, the Nagar in Semitic is the homonym and the cognate of the Syrian root of Naga and Naha, to save or to rescue, from Naga or Naga, to hit. The comparison in English are save and savage. You see, so you keep getting words that, adding one more word, it changes the meaning of the word. In the Egyptian Arabic, Naga is translated as a succeed, to succeed, or success. The appellations refer to the Naja, the cobra, allied to the angelic host, the conqueror. Why were they conquerors? Because the Nubian Empire, it went thousands and thousands of years before it eventually crumbled and fell to entropy. So there was always a reputation of them being able to protect, but them also being very dangerous, just as the serpent gets that same motif to this day. Even as Jesus being risen on a cross, Jesus being also the symbolic, as we've discussed, as the Nehushtan, but even deeper, that all of this is sitting on the back of your head. And we've showed that the superior brachium is Jesus sitting on the cross. So this Naga and the Nagus is sitting inside of your head, the savior, and can raise itself to the Mount Hermon, which is the Mount pineal gland, and then take you into a whole nother stage of consciousness. Or it can become like Seth and become really more a god of the world and actually worldly things, and just be wrapped in that completely, right? Because it goes on, it talks about how Aya, and I didn't finish that sentence earlier, but it talks about how Aya eventually is specifically the goat god of Mendes, because Aya actually means goat, right? So I'm gonna finish this here. It goes on, it says, the royal cobra of the Naga, presented as the savior of the Naga. The title is interchangeable with the smiter of the Naga, descriptive of a builder or a carpenter or a Nagar, symbolizes the king of Jupiter, the risen son of God, Venus. The snake is considerably duplicious, meaning like we got two different symbolisms going on here. The metaphor of the dual serpents is emblematic of the morning star and the evening star, embodied as the god and the goddess, linking to the resurrection and death found and encoded in the New Testament. And this is also because we get on one end, in this corner, we have the Naga hailing from Venus, and on this corner, we have Adam hailing from Mars. So we have Adam, or also in its cognate is the goat or the serum. And then we have Venus, who is sitting over here as the serpent. And so now we have two worlds, Mars and Venus. Like I say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And then now there is this need to unite these two worlds. And boy, if you try to ask anyone to do this externally, there's only going to be conflicts. There's not too many people who know how to unite these forces. Even within their mind, there is conflict. Because of the dogmatic traditions, they'll explain that, man, at a certain point, look at this, because also Osiris was about that kind of life too. Osiris is almost like a cognate of Seth, meaning that he loved that kind of lifestyle too. So it goes on and explain, it says that right here, the Near Eastern context reveal many amazing facts, such as the name Asura. So you remember the Asuras from the Vedic text of the Rig Veda is parallel to the Egyptian Asar or Osiris. Now, these simple connections for a real occultist is like, okay, wow, wait a minute. Okay, no wonder. No wonder then. Okay, so if Asar is the Asuras, of course, then the priests of Osiris, they were going to be the ones that were writing the new text, because that's what priests do. So let me take you into the background of this, right? So let's say I'm the Ishvaku king, right? So the land is already routed with multiple different kings and kingdoms. Some align, many are at war. That's what you saw in history. That's what's going on today. So as the protector of the people, what you kind of have to do is you have to enlist the greatest level of fear amongst your enemies. Okay, am I clear on that? That you would have to enlist amongst your enemies the greatest levels of fear, because the more they fear you, the less they're going to be prone to attacking you. Does that make sense? Little nah, yes. Just those y'all on the line over here. Little yeah, yes. That makes sense. That I'm just trying to make this very basic for you here, because some of this is very basic, but people are missing it. If I'm a king and I'm responsible for protecting these people, but who am I? They are with me because I'm protecting them from something. Who? Marauders. They're all over the place. All types of different types of things going on. Pig-faced men, the whole nine is going on. So I need to be able to strike fear into these other nations. How can that be done? Legends, myths, okay, beyond sheer ass kicking. Because obviously the most proficient priests weren't speculative. They knew how to make stuff like gunpowder, bombs, shit that other tribes, when they saw, were like, oh shit, they got some kind of powerful magic. The whole sky lit up and we all were vaporized. So when a tale like that gets out, so let me show you. So the kings had these priests around them because the priests were responsible for creating tales of the king as a god. Because after all, the kings were the gods. And remember, just the actual value of most people during that time was if you weren't a sovereign, then you were a slave. So you were a slave to the king, i.e. a slave to God. This is still going on today. So it's not foreign. People see themselves as slaves to God. God, I'm your servant. Okay. So in that respect, that means that you're looking up to this king like a god. But who's giving you the knowledge about who this king really is the priests. And the priests are the most creative at writing these stories and putting them in the people's ear so the people can start talking about it so that it can spread through the land. And eventually the king's enemies hear he has this weapon of light, this sword of light. And when he comes to the battlefield, it vanquishes everyone. Now, you can imagine that most kings, especially in a Ascetian lifestyle, are not going to the battlefield. That's TV. You know how they show you the old mythical King Richard with all the shit on, right? With his horse, and he's about to ride out in battle in front of the entire army. Is that really going to happen? Only in the Game of Thrones, right? So this doesn't happen. It's about how much money this king has to hire these mercenaries, and also if he has any kind of technological advances coming from chemistry, not necessarily let's warp everyone into another realm and send an army of necromongers after them. That the times of that's a whole nother epoch. That's a whole nother world. This was simply about the sword. And that's why all the kings, they passed a sword to each other. Like when you became a sovereign king, you were given a sword. Okay. Now that's symbolically Conan. Conan's also CNN. He's Canaan, right? What did they give him? Doom, 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 doom. The sword, right? Is always the sword. The cross is the sword. So it's symbolic that the kingship, as they call Jesus, he's the king. The kingship has to be passed to the king by the sword because he's going to be using it when it's talking about external protection, right? So it talks about how then, so this is how you can understand that how some of these rappers are kind of wrapped up in these rites too, like Jay-Z, who's Jehovah, right? In this case, the Demergic side. He's got who with him that don't get mentioned anymore, really? Memphis Bleak, right? Because for Jehovah to roll with Memphis is a part of the rite. You see what I mean? So just like for Cam to be there is a part of the rite. Cam has to be a part of the ritual. Memphis has to be a part of the ritual. So look at how it says the Near Eastern context reveal many amazing facts, such as the name of Asura in the Rig Veda is parallel of the Egyptian Asar, Osiris, and the goddess Didi, not to be confused with Puff Daddy, is that of the Egyptian goddess. Yeah, that's probably Didi. The synonymous use of the terms Data and Asura indicates that both came after the city Bosiris, city of Osiris, where Dedi was the goddess. The cause for ascribing derogation sense to the Asura and the Data by later priests is very similar to the Egyptian hatred of the god Seth. The later Egyptians hated the god Seth because his domain was under foreign occupation and Seth was adored by the foreign monarchs of Egypt. This has to explain everything to you right now. Similarly, Asura became evil to the Asiatic people, the foreigners, because Osiris was exalted by their opponents. To the Asiatic predecessors of the epic Purana priests, Osiris became a symbol of their enemies, okay? And this is just simply because you would have the ancient land of Osiris, which ran nothing like the new land of Osiris. So this idea of a new world order is not new. The entire Egypt, Nubia, all the whole thing was renewed to be called the New Kingdom. Once the Greeks came in and removed the old systems, but then they would go in and they would name themselves, I'm Set. I'm the king. I'm continuing the lineage. I got the signet ring and I'm going to go forward. And then the real rituals and rites of Seth and the knowledge and the wisdom that came with that path would be lost. And it would get consumed within the most base ideals of what Set and Osiris also were doing, which again has a lot to do with sexual magic, has a lot to do with those components, right? The rituals, the dancing, the drinking, the fermentation, the beers, the wines, the liquors, the alcohol, the spirits. So all of that will also come with it. But in this context, it would not definitely be used as the ancients were using them, because there were very few kings that actually were able to preserve all the rituals and all the rites. So just be aware then, to understand how kings be acting, is that basically they created these myths about themselves. And many of those myths had to be passed and put in the books. He was a thunderer. He commanded lightning on his own. When really none of that was really what was going on. If anything, there was some type of technological advance that the priestcrafts or craftsmen, like the fashioning of steel, the creation of gunpowder, the use of diseases and pestilence, like I say, oh, you know, these they would cause the whole land to be contaminated by a plague. If they wanted to do that right now, because we have an example of it, they wouldn't do it by going out to the grove and praying to a wooden owl statue. That's speculative. They would go to the laboratory like they did and whip up a tetrahedron like what AIDS looks like, and then they would send that into the world, and that magic, dark magic, black magic, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, who's giving even these terms? Everything dark becomes evil to these people at a certain stage, because their enemies come from a land that means the dark, which is the underworld. You see what I mean? So the deep sea, deep inside the sea. So we have to get to a stage now in humanity, in our spiritual consciousness and our awareness, that we're able to actually wean out by putting ourselves in that space and time, because we were there in some form or fashion of DNA. We were there, and just ruling out the illogical and using common sense. 33 kings. I got another listing here of 500 kings. Do you know how many crown princes there are right now inside of what is that? Saudi Arabia? Yeah, Saudi Arabia, right? How many princes are there? So if you're thinking about, well, how you know, you're kind of used to there being one king. Imagine when there's 500. And if everybody's trying to be sovereign, and everybody's trying to get all the girls, and everybody's trying to get all the money and all the beer and all the wine, how much does that leave for the rest of the people? Especially since the king has to stay wealthy in order to pay his mercenaries, which are for the protection, and then also to keep his marketing group, which are the priests, in full swing to keep creating more myths. And I'm telling you, just imagine a king when he comes back from a battle that he's won, and the stories that ensue. Well, what the king slew 50 men by himself with a jawbone of an ass. He was a Hercules. So there's going to be these stories that come out, and we have to figure out what part really is relevant to us. Since after all, the only thing that really matters is the personal spiritual experience that you're going through, which is very personal. If you're looking to have power to make lightning come down from heaven to destroy an entire army, well, when's the last time we've seen that happen? You'll be hoping on a speculative dream. But when you want to control your own worlds and you want to manifest proficiently and in balance, now we're talking. These are the kind of things that you can get into. But first, you got to unlearn. And you got to realize that the state of our people for a while was debased. Even to this day, the classifications are debased. There's no value within the person. So you got to restore that value, because that's what a sovereign is. A sovereign has value and their value makes them brothers. That is what the term sovereign means. It's actually that it's agreeing that everyone that has achieved X is now on the same level. And because they're on the same level, they now have become, let me show you this real quick, protection, which is also a shield. Look here, even in here, this is another book It's called One Language, One Tongue. It shows here, and this is also what Pierre Sabak also bears witness to, that we see here how much more difficult it has become to disclose the picture behind the words when we listen to their sounds, only instead of visualizing in the imaginative way what they intend to express. When we pass from tegos or roof into the Greek tagos, which is the leader or the general, to a modern abstract-minded human being, the last clue of the former image is lost. The leader or protector, the roof, okay, like in a house. That's what they call the big house. It's the pharaoh or Darrow, the big house or the big roof that is protecting. Hence, the difficulty of understanding such a word to Sultan, who we translate it simply as ruler and sovereign. And it can hardly imagine that such a name from the Arabian Nights could have anything to do with the Western tongues. Yet we can discover in the word stem in English as well as in German, once we disclose the true name of what it depicts, in Hebrew, the Sultan is called the Shalit. I thought that had said she legit for a moment. and in German, the Schalt, the Schalten, the Walton, it means to rule. These designations are not original, but are derived from a concrete picture of a shield or a shelter. The shield, the German shield, or the skiltus, right? And so we have Pierre Sabak, who also said that the angels were also known as the shields, that they fell from the sky in a shield, right? So it's that same thing as the protectors creating these massive stories as a form of protection within themselves, because when people hear about the power of these gods or these kings, they fear them. So it's less of a, you see how it's all external. And that's how the world has gotten to the stage that it's actually in right now. So in conclusion, because now that we have set this, we set this foundation. Let me just finalize my notes here. And let me just go to my thing here, 1 second. So let's demystify a few final things here in relation to why I believe personally that some people come from gold, like literally. It says, He in the session in the name of the land, name of a land. He was also the name of a Nubian land where Sosistrus III of the 12th dynasty set up a stela to mark the boundary between his kingdom in Egypt and the land of He. Now, remember, we talked about that when someone is setting up a stela and a boundary, that means because they're about to create another plane, another space, another nation, right? And so it says that the people of that land were called the Nehesi. Now, I believe that this is also the root term to the Nehus or the Negus, which actually is the Ethiopian reference to a king or a monarch, right? So the Leiden Papyrus also provides a strong support for this identity of the serpent king Sesha with the Egyptian He for his Nubian origin. The serpent of eternity, that is the god He, according to this papyrus, came from the Nun, which is, of course, the primordial waters. And he was a Cushite serpent of real gold. The riddle-like statement probably meant that God of eternity belonged to the people of the serpent race. And the Nun and Cush were two neighboring places of Nun, was located as the identified above in the kingdom of Cush, that is in Nubia. The serpent of gold was possibly another play of words to mean he was a Nubian, since the Egyptian name for Nubia meant gold. Nun was another name of the country. He seems likely for the coupling of the two countries, He and Cush, in Tutmosis III's list of the southern countries paying tribute to him. If God He came from Nun, then his namesake country He was also another form of Nun. In brief, the land of He and the country of Nun in Egyptian were identical, okay? So it goes on, and it even explains again how the words like key, that anytime key is added to the word, it means the land. So even word names like Enki are actually reference to the land of En, not to an actual person, but all of the people within that land. And then as you see here it talks about in Rama's family, the epics like punch bowls contain a mixture of numerous accounts of past events, people, and heroes. They are very similar to the Pali accounts where the ancient cities and the places reappear as the birth and the teaching of the places and various past Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Thus, when the mixture melted into a juicy story, it also melted away all traces of chronological sequences. Rama's family had no similarity with Ramses II's real life. For example, Lava and Kusa, the names of Rama's two sons, were the Egyptian names of the two neighboring countries, Lab, Libya, and Cush, Nubia. And Ramses II had thus two lands under him. The epic had followed here an archaic style of political relations instead of a true family relation. Sons in epics could signify vassals or subordinate kings. And indeed, in the New Kingdom text, the ruler of Cush was called the king's son of Cush. Brothers signified kings of equal ranks. Just like in the Amarna letters, Egyptian king was addressed as brother by the Median and the Egyptian kings, which suggested during the time of the Hyksos Federation that all of Egypt was under it, and all of those princes were included into it. In that federation, father meant a supreme sovereign like Yuvanaskva, Mandara, and Aja Ikpada of the Rig Veda. So again, it's explaining that just because, like in the Bible where it says, oh, they were all sons or they were all brothers, that term was always a reference to more directly that they were all in agreement, that they were all sovereigns. And in that sovereignty and in those treaties with each other and those agreements with each other, that's what made them brothers and sisters. Do you see what I mean here? So this is why restoration of our communities, restoration of who we are, starts first with the awareness of who we are and why we all have to work on ourselves in order to bring ourselves to a certain stage. Like, it's like, bring yourself to the medium. It's not, you don't have to be exalted and make yourself higher than someone else. That's not what's being said. It's that find your value. Because when you find your value, anything else that is found its value, you are now equal to. And in that, you are a sovereign in that realm. So this is a grand level of awareness. And in conclusion, one has to also be aware, in the conclusion of the title of the show, it's just about the conflicts are real. Like sometimes there's this new age perception that the ancient world was completely harmonic. Like everybody got along. And for sure, the closer to the source, yes. So that seems to be a factor of time, though. It seems that the longer we're on Earth, the more conflicts arise because the amount of division. Versus in earlier stages of Earth, when the family was pretty much everybody who you saw, and the only ones that was in existence was the same folks that was in the teepee with you, there wasn't quarrels to the degree of what we're seeing now. So in conclusion, let's look at here. It says the Nagas that pervade all Indian traditions were in fact an ancient people, same as the Egyptian NGS. By the way, this is where they get the term niggas. If you've been asking yourself, this whole conversation is like, is that what? Yes. And the Rig Veda tribe, Nahushas, and the Nahusas, sons of the Nahusa, who were at one time in Nubia, these Egyptian NGS, that is Naga, people appear as soldiers along with the Koreans, that is the Kuru, fighting against Tutmosis III during his campaign in Syria and in Palestine, okay? So this is also, they say that many of the Nagas were actually in Palestine. And Tutmosis was for sure pillaging Nubia at that stage. and even tried and attempted to blot Nubia or the land of the Nagas out from the records. This will probably give you a hint to, even though that's definitely not the original people there, while it's still popping off in Palestine, while you have like these, it's like the land itself is still uneasy and not at rest because the truth to the land has not yet been revealed. So the same cyclical and generational energy is still within and embedded within the land because the people's blood is actually in the land. The people are the land, right? So it says here that during the Amarna period, Nahas, the cuneiform name of the same people, the Egyptian NGS, appears as a kingdom at about the same region in Syria that was called the Hatina by the later Assyrians. This suggests that the cuneiform's name Nahas was in fact an imitation of the Rig Veda name Nahushas and Nahusas. That this could be the reason that the Mahabharata alternative names of the Hastapura being compounded with Naga, and that perhaps the Nahas was an alternate form of the Akkadian name Hastapura. Apparently, the kingdom Nahas was founded by a coalition of two martial tribes, the Koreans and the Nahas, who fought amongst Thutmose III of Egypt. The presence of this ethnic name in all Indian traditions, including the Rig Veda, and the fact that their name originated after the Egyptian place named NHS for Nubia, suggests that the state Nahas and the Amarna area was founded by the soldiers who retreated from Nubia. If these assumptions based on names are correct, then the Hurrians, the Indo-Aryans, along with the Semites, were in occupation of the upper and eastern Egypt all through the recorded dark era of Egypt. So what we find in conclusion here is we find a very precise and concise history of, so just very specifically, what we have is we have the very spiritual, the mystical, if you may, the magical era of existence erased and replaced by when foreign kings come in, name themselves after the territory, take on all the symbolism. The symbolism is dual. So it's not just that, hey, they're the saviors and the lovers, they will kill you. So you see what I mean? So we're not saying the Nubians were the best people or the worst people. What we're saying is every person contains these two sides. But if you're more interested in the regenerative component, because that's what this was a symbol of, it was a symbol of immortality. It was a knot that could never be broken. It was imperishable. I may have to read the text one more time. Give me one quick second. I mean, you could never get enough, but it's an explanation just very directly of this. Oh, also, let me drop this one in here real quick while we're still here. It says here the name, well, let me just go down here. The other story of the royal family of the Somali, whose one son, Mali, was killed in the battle over the possession of heaven. Let me just turn this on. Okay, so look at this. The other story of the royal family, Somali. Now, remember, this is in the Rig Veda, and that's why it's like the Rig Vedas are they're almost the oldest account of history, but they were altered by the priests. And the names were all changed. And now we're looking over there to Persia and India for these places that still don't exist. And then it becomes a whole mythical thing. It's like, oh, in the sky, because then they add a couple of pictures of some Vimanas in the sky. And then at that point, we're not even talking about anything on earth anymore. And that's why this is a missing link, because without this, then nobody's going to be going anywhere. If anything, this is by design that this part of history is being removed. So it says very specifically, the other story of the royal family Somali, whose one son Mali was killed in the battle over the possession of heaven. That is Heliopolis. So it should be very specific that in most texts, when they talk about going to heaven, they're talking about going to Heliopolis, because all in the ancient settings, that Heliopolis was heaven, and kings fought over Heliopolis. And when you won, you then became the king of heaven. I mean, they went in like this. This is where they were. No PlayStation. So there's a lot of creativity going on here, right? It's like less waste of time, no TV. So there's more to really get up to during these times, right? So it goes on and says, and after being defeated by the Devas or the gods, they fled to Lanka with his other son and all of his people. Also suggests that there was a constant battle between the Hyksos kings, the gods, because remember, every king deified themselves. I'm God. You see what I mean? So there was no distinguishment between the king and God in the people's mind. So anytime they said the gods, they were referring to the kings. So anytime you got whooped by a king, they said you got whooped by a god. Okay, so it goes on and it says that the Devas or the gods, they fled to Lanka with his other son and all of his people, and also suggests that there were constant battles between the Hyksos kings, between kings of the Kasi and the Kosala line over the possession of heaven. That is Heliopolis and the lower eastern Egyptian delta, and that many were forced to retreat to Syria, and many Syrian cities and states were founded by these kings. Ravana, son of the moon god Lavana, the kingdom of Lebanon, was one of them. Apparently, the epic Purana name Somali has survived in the modern name Somali, as in Somalia. So this means that, as I mentioned, this was today just an unveiling of the metaphysical data set. This was within just a few curious queries, not as laser focused as it's going to get as we continue to take apart and put back together, meaning that basically deprogramming, and I'm opening up something here, deprogramming the fake history, because it's real. And it's going to keep going as long as they're a king. Now look at the king of Britain. Like, I mean, the story. Oh my goodness, the stories. But you can see why it happens, right? And then now we're out of the time of mythology. Now it's the time of mastery. So when a king says that he will make the sky light up like 1,000 suns, they will drop a bomb. I know some folks say there's no nuclear bomb. Okay, play with it if you want to. There's some Chernobyl running around. It's like at the end of the day, it's like the scriptures become fulfilled. The myth becomes fulfilled because of the potential. It's like they know there's a potential to create something that is so destructive. And it's just this priest and craftsman over here still working on it. Until finally, thousands of years in the future, they've created something that can light up 1,000 suns and vanquish all the warriors on the battlefield. At the end of the day, also, some say that they had stuff then. You know, I don't think those were all myths. I think that, yes, there was clearly some power, but the greatest power comes into use for self. The greatest protection is the awareness and the wisdom of how to progress. The only thing that really matters to you is what's going on inside of your mind and inside of your heart. So if you're over here bowing down to some kings or some gods and their stories, and you haven't took the time out to know who you are, if you get to the point where you start making up stuff, I'm hearing folks make up, I was in the underworld and these folks came to me. And it's like, what is this about? You got to sit down with yourself and say, for one moment, why is it so necessary for you to tell these stories? Even if they're just your dreams, how valuable are they? How valuable are they to other people? They may be valuable to you because you're the only one living in your dreams. But to everybody else, they got to live their own dream. So it's time to empower people with what is necessary to live their own dreams. And that's why I believe that ultimately, in the end, which is but the beginning, especially in an endless knot, the Nagas still will remain as the saviors, because when people figure out who they are and what their role was and what their knowledge was, then the salvation or the salve, as they say, oh, they was passing this salve around. This oil, the Messiah was anointed with the crocodile fat called the Messi, right? The Mashiach, the Nahash, the Nagus. So it's all a reference to specifically this ability to braid DNA, this ability to really work with the light, the ability to be able to see clearly and to shine through all this darkness and distortion and see the truth. Now, time draws nigh. All the stories of our ancestors have been corrupted by those who took their place. And also, this is a matrilineal thing going on. Like, they didn't just come in like killing everybody. They were marrying princesses. This is what the story is, the marrying the princess of Nubia. You see what I mean? Who's Isis? Isis is a princess of Nubia. So they got you over there thinking Isis is from the netherworld, and that is true, but the netherworld is actually in Nubia. So that's what I'm saying. So if you don't think any of this stuff matters, and you're on your journey to learn spiritual knowledge, this is the first place that the hiccups are going to continue, because then it's going to go down Orion. Next thing you know, you're going to be seeing Kumbaya and Namaste and all this stuff, and you're not even going to know what any of that means. And most importantly, you're not going to realize what any of it can do for you. So I want to conclude today by mentioning that we have placed this series because, as you know, this is the second Saturday or second Friday from the last time we got together. But we get together every Friday inside of Sovereignty Mentorship. But since I said I was going to do this, and I definitely do what I'm going to say, I placed, if you log into Secret Energy, and then you go to the Innerversity, which is in this tab here. So you would click on this tab. Let me move me out of the way. So you go to Secret Energy, you go to the right menu, and then you click on Innerversity. It's going to take you to this page after you log in. On this page, if you are a subscriber of Sovereignty Mentorship, then you will get the Netflix of metaphysics. This is the Innerversity. Right? So we have all of these courses of gems. As I said, the time that we spent, that we had to take it into a private sector, like instead of something like on public in YouTube, just really preserving that energy. So there are courses here. However, again, since this series, which is going to continue about sovereignty, will be available to you, you will find two things available to you when you log in. You'll see this right here. Beyond God, what is above below. So you'll see the sovereignty codices. Okay. So this is free for you. Also, specialist training is there, and it is free for you. So you come in here, you go to sovereignty codices, and what you'll find is you'll find, oh, wow. Okay. I guess I'll have to upload that or make it live because it's in there. But what you'll find is you'll find last week's build, because we had a digest. We had to digest what came out that first time because, you know, we was going in, but then the next week came, we digested all that. I'll turn that on, make it live because evidently it's in draft. And you'll go here, you'll be able to continue. And this show, which will also be remastered because the quality inside of YouTube is a little crappy, but there's a good quality over here, will also be in here. So if during this process you fall off for whatever reason and you're ready to get back on your camel, then you can go into Secret Energy, Innerversity, Sovereignty Codices, and you will find the continuation of the series. Also, to answer that question, like some people are like, well, how can I support? Support yourself. Join Sovereignty Mentorship. This is 11 years, 12 years, actually a whole lifetime of spiritual awareness, all here. And step by step, the process of self-mastery, covering everything. No stone unturned, nothing missed. All the way from the diet to communication to relationships to money to all of the whole thing. Because at some point, all of our knowledge, it has to come to become wisdom. And that simply means just having the knowledge that is going to empower you and is going to create something this time in your life. It's 2021. We're not wearing Jesus sandals anymore. This is now the time for us to step up and step in, and also to be innovative. In this time, you know, I said recently, metaphysical data set with AI is coming to destroy us. Ah! Okay. Well, AWAS may be coming to destroy quite a few of the people who are serving that, including XR15J12 and all these AI names that they're now giving their kids and all that. But that's the road they're going down. As I explained to you before, AI for me is just a very fancy search engine. And when I give it the things to search, like the metaphysical data set, then we actually start getting to the root of the entire thing so we can go beyond. I don't want to be calling anybody's ancestors out, talking bad about certain gods, disrespecting certain cultures, all because somebody was listening to an Ishvaku king who was writing that about some people that he destroyed and didn't give a shit about. It's like respecting a culture. And y'all watch how things shift. Like it used to be somebody was practicing something different. You was kind of interested. It's like, yo, so what is this? Oh, y'all read now that you're Orthodox. So what do you do? Now it's like, well, if it's not my God, then, you know, we're going to war in here. So you even watched in your own lifetime how things changed about accepting people's cultures and seeing that as a collaboration. We're all part of a family. That's that's math. So white folks, black folks, whatever you are, you know, if it's on the white folks side, Pythagoras told you it's shaped like a pyramid, 4 dots, 3 dots, 2 dots, 1 dot to show everything's coming from the same source. If you run around in a jet black Nubian skin, then that means that your folks was the originators of that. So you should also know that too. Every single person, black, white, blue, whatever, is what they come out when they come out the other side of the prism of light. Our ancestors were interested in creating all these variables because they knew the more that they mixed up with the DNA, the more the higher the probability of different levels of creation. And it extended. It's not just what different kind of humans, it's a different kind of animals. Do you think that the ants is pissed off because the other ant is lighter? I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. Do you think that the monkeys, well, monkeys be beefing, so I can't put them in a circle. Monkeys be beefing. They got monkeys out here. Maybe that's why we beef. Because these monkeys, I be seeing them in wild, they even be by the house. They be beefing. So I'm just saying directly, we have to be able to expand. And the only way we're going to do that is to begin to unify the knowledge and to realize, well, what's the essence of this story though? When it was in its most purified form, closest to the source, what was it really revealing? You see what I mean? Before the alcohol, before the strip clubs, before all of that, what was Set really about? What was that about? Set was the God, the only God that could take life. And that was the only uniqueness of that God. So then, of course, the Ishvaku king comes in. The first thing he's going to want to be related to is the one that's taking life because they're coming with swords and they're scared in fear of, you see what I mean? So this is the setting as the world lays out like an entire play, an entire drama unfolding. And now we have to be on point with where we're at in all of this. And there's nothing greater to me than having true and exact knowledge. The knowledge that I pulled today was from multiple sources, all bearing witness to the same thing, some going deeper than others. Some's going in other directions just because, what are you know, like with David Icke, like think about David Icke, he's like the serpents are ruling the world. And it's that all of what you're reading from these ancient times is coming from writings about the Nubians because the Nubians classified themselves as that and may have been actually that. You see what I mean? They may have been sitting on closer to that one strand of DNA, which is more reptilian, that original strand. You see what I mean? So what I'm saying is, but have you solved anything? Did you really learn how to bring the salve or salvation? Did you know how to really ignite the shining one within? To ignite all of your chakras and your wheels? Or was it about finding another enemy? Because if you want them to be your enemy, and by all means, there's the flip of that coin too. And that's also where humanity is at also, like all these quarrels and beefs with these nations and stuff, like you don't know where a lot of these people are really coming from and who these ancestors of these people really are. The last thing you want to really do is start getting yourself caught up. That's why I try my best to not get into conflicts with people. And the best way to do that is to be by yourself sometimes because people want to fight. They want to argue. And then, you know, they call in the ancient traditions and they start sending arrows at you. You know, when they think about you in a negative way, they're sending arrows. I don't want a bunch of people sending arrows at me. Even when in the time when I was practicing Christianity, there were some people that come in, they don't believe in Christianity, right? And I would be like, and they would just go in, they were just bashing Jesus and all that. And I would still say, well, you still got to technically think that if this is still something that says it can live on and it's living in the afterlife, would you really want to make something like that your enemy? Is it most necessary to have every single, to relate to everything in life in a contrastal, conflictive state? But isn't that really what all the knowledge is kind of turned into? It's kind of turned into like even the surface stuff that we're getting now. It's like a war against them now. Now it's Bill Gates. Now it's these people. Now it's that people. But as I said before, teachers never getting a time to study. The most peaceful beings are never getting time to be peaceful. They're always at war. So now it's time for us to wake up, wax strong with the metaphysical knowledge, the truth to all things, let it all start coming together. So that way we become aware of the possibilities and the potentials of what we can do inside of our consciousness. And then we start braiding our DNA together. So I wanted to say to everyone, wholeness and balanced vibrations. I'm glad we got the opportunity to be here. It's been 2 hours and 41 minutes. I feel like at every point that I was talking in this conversation today, that we was only like 15 minutes in. Like it just felt everlasting. It felt like, well, we got to give a little bit more. I mean, come on, we got to hit the data set a little bit more. I'm like, okay, it's really 3 hours in. Some final gems here. And again, just to explain to everybody, like if you're on this line today, I guess it's a little late for this. It's 1,000 of us watching right now. There are 553 likes, right? So they say that this like thing, according to this guidebook on YouTube, it gets other people watching this. If you could do anything, just smash the like button. Just smash that button so other people can actually understand that this is even here, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, if you want to support the growth here, you know how people got Patreon, they got all this different stuff. Join the Innerversity. In the Innerversity, it's all there. It even shows you a way to sustain it financially if you just need to find another way and let something else pay for it. But more importantly, come into the space and actually gain the level of wisdom and the connection that the tribe has to share with you if you can support that way. I also will say that etymology is very interesting. It continues to reveal more and more things. And one of the things in conclusion, and why, okay, because at the end of this story, you would have to say, well, why would I want to do this anyway? You know, like, why not just go back to sleep and play around with some other stuff and wait? Well, there is a situation going on in the world. I decoded this within the 2 words which were brought to me early in the morning. One was menace. And I look at that word and I immediately see that it says the first man. Menace. Ace means one. Men, we've just decoded. Okay. So it's basically saying that the first man became a menace to society. No longer being able to use the powers and the potentials and the abilities, but actually becoming more of a thorn in the side of the people. And we've seen that unfold with Men and Mendes, who eventually becomes the goat god Mendes, by the way. We go forward then and we find, is there any other word with man attached to it and other little acronyms on the back? So I immediately go to the serpent words, and the word is Mansor, M-A-N-S-O-R, which is the root to the word technomancer or necromancer. And this word is a direct reference to one who actually uses spirits or ghosts in a form or in a fashion, right? So it's like basically it's an entryway into the realization that before all of these technologies, there was a technomancing technology or a necromancing technology that was being utilized in order to raise dead people, to communicate with dead people, to talk to ancestors. Like, I think people miss the connection. You know, they talk about, okay, being dead is just leaving this world, point blank. To communicate with the dead is necromancy, right? But if the ancestors were here and somebody's saying that they're in communication with the ancestors, aren't they necromancers? I mean, technically. So it's very clear when looking through the etymology that one of the arts practiced inside of Nubia was necromancy, that they had a very close relationship with the underworld and with the dead. In fact, it appears that the Nile, when it's running underground, is basically the source. It's like what they call the river Styx. It's like where the river, that spirit water, goes down. And that's where, you know, when it's in its base state, or what's called Nu, right? Nu is the chaos or primordial waters. So spirit becomes that first. And then this necromancy in its original form was to basically then infuse that prima materia water, if you may, into a vessel, right? So to basically raise this from the netherworld, or what was called to raise it from the dead, okay? So this is also why the whole Jesus raising from the dead, or the Nahushan raising themselves from the dead, okay? Because they were very familiar with the ability to go down and then to come back up, right? So it's like a baptismal, right? Because Manu was also the Manichaean god, and the Manu is also John the Baptist, okay? However, when they corrupt your ancestors' knowledge, that's why I say I got to always come back around and say, well, you know, there's an addendum to what I was talking about now that I look into this deeper, because every time I look into this knowledge, there's always something in my consciousness that says, I need you to purify this. You need to understand that all this knowledge, there's a level to this that is so pure. In what you're looking at is you're looking at the muck of it. You're looking at the worst part of it, the fertilization, the shit. And what I need you to do is I need you to turn this into roses. I need you to find the most purified version of this. What is it really? So again, to have the responsibility of being the custodian of a person from the realm of living and dying, that's a hell of a responsibility. And we've talked about that before, even with Anu or Anubis and all the rest of what went on in those rites and those rituals, right? But that's another story. But we specifically are honing in on when someone else comes in, takes the same knowledge, and then utilizes it for this external benefit. What you get then is things like money. Money is also a form of necromancy. It's taking a dead president, which is what's on the bill, because the value of the dead president is what is the note that is being exchanged. He's got his signature on there, which is the two-dimensional imprint or 2D imprint of him, right? And then now this has become an exchange for energy, which is money. But more importantly, it becomes an integer money is an integer to demark death or debt. Debt is death, okay? So very simply, the debts that people are accruing, the money, okay, so to really understand money is to really understand that money's value is based on debt. This is why someone who has, let's say they have a mortgage, okay? So they have a 30-year mortgage. Let me just explain this very simply. Maybe they owe $500,000, right? So they take that mortgage out initially, and now they owe $500,000. As time goes on, the value of that $500,000 becomes less and less and less and less, because the value of money becomes a different denomination. So $500,000 in 1980 is not worth the same as $500,000 in 2021, right? $500,000 in 1980 is worth way more or more than it's worth in 2021. So see, money is constantly depreciating. So that means that this system, the way that the rich stay rich is that they borrow off of their riches. They borrow and they borrow off of their debts. It's just if those who are mathematicians and really understand money, they understand this in money. I found a video that explains this in depth, but just to understand that the reason why they're always taking on debt is because they know that basically the old money that they owe is worth less than the new money that they can borrow. So people who basically have saved a lot of money, especially if it's fiat, have saved something that is becoming progressively worth less and less. So what rich people, quote unquote, have done is they borrow new money all the time, pay off old debts, which are worth less, and then keep all their commodities and borrow against their commodities. So what this ultimately is is it's a debt-based system. Anyone who gets in it basically starts getting in debt. And so how necromancy comes into this is because when you, as we mentioned, when you're leaving the world or even in the world, forget leaving the world, but when you're in the world and you're in debt, that debt is to someone or something. A sovereign is not in debt. A sovereign doesn't owe anybody. So that's what I was saying about these terms. Like, it's a process to become a sovereign, and it eventually involves you getting away from money and using a sovereign system of, which is generally private, of transaction. So that way you're not getting hit with the reflux currents and the spells that are surrounded by the talismans that they're using, because they're still using one of the most debased forms of Goetia and necromancy, because it's being used for something external. It's not being used to ferry or guide a soul that may be lost on the astral plane and needs to understand the next bridge to the light wave that they need to catch next. It's opposite to that. Do you see what I mean? Money is opposite to that. It's about basically making a person completely detestable and not even being aware that there's even a spiritual world, or that they don't even care about all this stuff. And that's what I was saying before. There's such a thin line to see how a lot of these kings were just pretenders and lying and creating myths, to still realizing that there's power and there's potential. So I want you to go forth from today, not becoming one of those people who believe, oh, I knew it was all metaphor. I just said you need to separate what is myth from what is fact. And that's going to be most important for you in your own spiritual growth. And that there is for sure powers, there's for sure abilities, but they're to be shared with those that are inside of your family and those that are in your harmonic and inside of your vibration, because they're the ones that are going to understand it the most, because they've been able to do it themselves. And that's what actually makes us sovereign. So we all stand at the table together. We all realize also that while we have no dependencies, what we can all contribute to each other makes it even greater, the sum total of what we can enjoy. That's why we come together. So I trust that all is well. I trust that this makes perfect sense. We will continue with this series, more than likely on a digest next week. You know where to, or strong, as we call it, a strong front, not a weekend. So as we continue with this, wow, yeah, that's what I got for today. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was very clear that I had to personally enlist something that I feel is very proficient. So that way, when we come out on that other end, if you didn't know, you'll know exactly why. If you didn't become a sovereign, you will know exactly what to go to and what you need to work on. It won't be so vast and speculative that we won't be able to manifest it. We will go right to the documentation, right to the ancient knowledge, right to the clarification of that knowledge and its application. And then that will be what goes into our consciousness. And that's actually what will begin to continuously turn our wheels. And so that way we can come together in unity, realize the purest form of our ancestral energetics. And in that way we can get out of the hands of these city kings, because it's clear that, you know, New York and all these big cities are still ruled by city kings. London, this is all city king stuff. And it's nothing new from really what had already begun to take place when our world lost some of its great secrets. So let us continue to restore that by coming into awareness of ourselves, wholeness. So I'm going to set the lines so you could say wholeness to the rest of the continent that is viewing here today. And yes, I trust that we'll all continue to go forward with this awareness of wisdom. Thank you.
Wholeness.
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 Wholeness. Wholeness.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness and thank you. Gratitude.
Wholeness.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness. Wholeness tribe.
Dominique.
Wholeness.
This tribe.
Well, then why can't we see it?
Our purpose. Create a star within a star.
Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations Tribe.
Your awareness may be powerful enough to control your instincts. Your instinct will be to remove your hand from the box.
Is at peace. There is no hunger. There is no violence. The environment is healed. Honesty, courtesy, and kindness are practiced by all.
Finally, we get to, at a certain point, this 8th and 9th dimensional being.
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own.
Where is your tribe?
Your instinct will be to remove your hand from the box.
Wholeness, see everyone soon.